Chapter 69, in which the reader, no doubt, will be as astonished as D'Artagnan was to meet an old acquaintance. There is always something in a landing, if it be only from the smallest sea-boat, a trouble and confusion which do not leave the mind the liberty of which it stands in need in order to study at the first glance the new locality presented to it. The movable bridges, the agitated sailors, the noise of the water on the pebbles, the cries and importunities of those who wait upon the shores, are multiplied details of that sensation which is summed up in one single result, hesitation. It was not, then, till after standing several minutes on the shore that D'Artagnan saw upon the port, but more particularly in the interior of the isle, an immense number of workmen in motion. At his feet D'Artagnan recognized the 5 chalons laden with rough stone he had seen leave the port of Piriel. The smaller stones were transported to the shore by means of a chain formed by 25 or 30 peasants. The large stones were loaded on trolleys which conveyed them in the same direction as the others, that is to say, towards the works of which D'Artagnan could as yet appreciate neither the strength nor the extent. Everywhere was to be seen an activity equal to that which Telemachus observed on his landing at Salentum. D'Artagnan felt a strong inclination to penetrate into the interior, but he could not, under the penalty of exciting mistrust, exhibit too much curiosity. He advanced then little by little, scarcely going beyond the line formed by the fishermen on the beach, observing everything, saying nothing, and meeting all suspicion that might have been excited with a half-silly question or a polite bow. And yet, whilst his companions carried on their trade, giving or selling their fish to the workmen or the inhabitants of the city, D'Artagnan had gained ground by degrees, and, reassured by the little attention paid to him, he began to cast an intelligent and confident look upon the men and things that appeared before his eyes. And his very first glance fell on certain movements of earth about which the eye of a soldier could not be mistaken. At the 2 extremities of the port, in order that their fires should converge upon the great axis of the ellipsis formed by the basin, in the first place, 2 batteries had been raised, evidently destined to receive flank pieces. For D'Artagnan saw the workmen finishing the platform and making ready the demi-circumference in wood upon which the wheels of the pieces might turn to embrace every direction over the epaulement. By the side of each of these batteries, other workmen were strengthening gabions filled with earth, the lining of another battery. The latter had embrasures, and the overseer of the works called successively men who, with cords, tied the saucissons and cut the lozenges and right angles of turfs destined to retain the matting of the embrasures. By the activity displayed in these works, already so far advanced, they might be considered as finished. They were not yet furnished with their cannons, but the platforms had their jeets and their medrias all prepared. The earth, beaten carefully, was consolidated, and supposing the artillery to be on the island, in less than 2 or 3 days the port might be completely armed. That which astonished D'Artagnan, when he turned his eyes from the coast batteries to the fortifications of the city, was to see that Belle-Isle was defended by an entirely new system, of which he had often heard the Comte de la Fère speak as a wonderful advance, but of which he had as yet never seen the application. These fortifications belonged neither to the Dutch method of Marolles, nor to the French method of the Chevalier Antoine de Ville, but to the system of Main-Son Mallet, a skillful engineer, who about 6 or 8 years previously had quitted the service of Portugal to enter that of France. The works had this peculiarity, that instead of rising above the earth, as did the ancient ramparts destined to defend the city from escalades, they, on the contrary, sank into it, and what created the height of the walls was the depth of the ditches. It did not take long to make D'Artagnan perceive the superiority of such a system, which gives no advantage to cannon. Besides, as the fosses were lower than, or on a level with the sea, these fosses could be instantly inundated by means of subterranean sluices. Otherwise, the works were almost complete, and a group of workmen, receiving orders from a man who appeared to be conductor of the works, were occupied in placing the last stones. A bridge of planks thrown over the fosses for the greater convenience of the maneuvers connected with the barrows, joined the interior to the exterior. With an air of simple curiosity, D'Artagnan asked if he might be permitted to cross the bridge, and he was told that no order prevented it. Consequently, he crossed the bridge and advanced towards the group. This group was superintended by the man whom D'Artagnan had already remarked, and who appeared to be the engineer-in-chief. A plan was lying open before him upon a large stone forming a table, and at some paces from him a crane was in action. This engineer, who by his evident importance first attracted the attention of D'Artagnan, wore a justaucorps, which, from its sumptuousness, was scarcely in harmony with the work he was employed in, that rather necessitated the costume of a master mason than of a noble. He was a man of immense stature and great square shoulders, and wore a hat covered with feathers. He gesticulated in the most majestic manner, and appeared, for D'Artagnan only saw his back, to be scolding the workmen for their idleness and want of strength. D'Artagnan continued to draw nearer. At that moment the man with the feathers ceased to gesticulate, and, with his hands placed upon his knees, was following, half-bent, the effort of 6 workmen to raise a block of hewn stone to the top of a piece of timber destined to support that stone, so that the cord of the crane might be passed under it. The 6 men, all on one side of the stone, united their efforts to raise it to 8 or 10 inches from the ground. Sweating and blowing, Miles the Seventh got ready against there should be daylight enough beneath it to slide in the roller that was to support it. But the stone had already twice escaped from their hands before gaining a sufficient height for the roller to be introduced. There can be no doubt that every time the stone escaped them, they bounded quickly backwards to keep their feet from being crushed by the refalling stone. Every time, the stone, abandoned by them, sunk deeper into the damp earth, which rendered the operation more and more difficult. A third effort was followed by no better success, but with progressive discouragement. And yet, when the 6 men were bent towards the stone, the man with the feathers had himself, with a powerful voice, given the word of command, firm, which regulates maneuvers of strength. Then he drew himself up. Oh, said he, what is all this about? Have I to do with men of straw? Corne de boeuf. Stand on one side, and you shall see how this is to be done. Peste, said D'Artagnan, will he pretend to raise that rock? That would be a sight worth looking at. The workmen, as commanded by the engineer, drew back with their ears down and shaking their heads, with the exception of the one who held the plank, who prepared to perform the office. The man with the feathers went up to the stone, stooped, slipped his hands under the face lying upon the ground, stiffened his Herculean muscles, and without a strain, with a slow motion, like that of a machine, he lifted the end of the rock a foot from the ground. The workman who held the plank profited by the space thus given him, and slipped the roller under the stone. That's the way, said the giant, not letting the rock fall again, but placing it upon its support. More to you, cried D'Artagnan. I know but one man capable of such a feat of strength. Hein, cried the Colossus, turning round. Porthos, murmured D'Artagnan, seized with stupor, Porthos at Belle-Isle. On his part, the man with the feathers fixed his eyes upon the disguised lieutenant, and, in spite of his metamorphosis, recognized him. D'Artagnan, cried he, and the color mounted to his face. Hush, said he to D'Artagnan. Hush, in his turn, said the Musketeer. In fact, if Porthos had just been discovered by D'Artagnan, D'Artagnan had just been discovered by Porthos. The interest of the particular secret of each struck them both at the same instant. Nevertheless, the first movement of the 2 men was to throw their arms around each other. What they wished to conceal from the bystanders was not their friendship, but their names. But, after the embrace, came reflection. What the devil brings Porthos to Belle-Isle, lifting stones? Said D'Artagnan. Only D'Artagnan uttered that question in a low voice. Less strong in diplomacy than his friend, Porthos thought aloud. How the devil did you come to Belle-Isle? Asked he of D'Artagnan. And what do you want to do here? It was necessary to reply without hesitation. To hesitate in his answer to Porthos would have been a check, for which the self-love of D'Artagnan would never have consoled itself. Pardieu, my friend, I am at Belle-Isle because you are. Ow! Bow! Said Porthos, visibly stupefied with the argument, and seeking to account for it to himself, with a felicity of deduction we know to be peculiar to him. Without doubt, continued D'Artagnan, unwilling to give his friend time to recollect himself, I have been to see you at Pierrefonds. Indeed? Yes. And you did not find me there? No, but I found Mouston. Is he well? Peste. Well, but Mouston did not tell you I was here. Why should he not have perchance, deserved to lose his confidence? No, but he did not know it. Well, that is a reason at least that does not offend my self-love. Then how did you manage to find me? My dear friend, a great noble like you always leaves traces behind him on his passage, and I should think but poorly of myself if I were not sharp enough to follow the traces of my friends. This explanation, flattering as it was, did not entirely satisfy Porthos. But I left no traces behind me, for I came here disguised, said Porthos. Ah, you came disguised, did you? Said D'Artagnan. Yes. And how? As a miller. And do you think a great noble, like you, Porthos, can affect common manners so as to deceive people? Well, I swear to you, my friend, that I played my part so well that everybody was deceived. Indeed, so well that I have not discovered and joined you. Yes, but how did you discover and join me? Stop a bit. I was going to tell you how. Do you imagine, Mouston? Ah, it was that fellow, Mouston, said Porthos, gathering up those two triumphant arches which serve him for eyebrows. But stop, I tell you, it was no fault of Mouston's because he was ignorant of where you were. I know he was, and that is why I am in such haste to understand. Oh, how impatient you are, Porthos. When I do not comprehend, I am terrible. Well, you will understand. Aramis wrote to you at Pierrefonds, did he not? Yes. And he told you to come before the equinox. That is true. Well, that is it, said D'Artagnan, hoping that this reason would mystify Porthos. Porthos appeared to give himself up to a violent mental labor. Yes, said he, I understand. As Aramis told me to come before the equinox, you have understood that that was to join him. You then inquired where Aramis was, saying to yourself, where Aramis is, there Porthos will be. You have learnt that Aramis was in Bretagne, and you said to yourself, Porthos is in Bretagne. Exactly. In good truth, Porthos, I cannot tell why you have not turned conjurer. So you understand that arriving at Rushburnett, I heard of the splendid fortifications going on at Belle Isle. The account raised my curiosity. I embarked in a fishing boat, without dreaming that you were here. I came, and I saw a monstrous fine fellow lifting a stone Ajax could not have stirred. I cried out. Nobody but the Baron de Bracia could have performed such a feat of strength. You heard me. You turned round. You recognized me. We embraced. And, my foi, if you like, my dear friend, we will embrace again. Ah, now all is explained, said Porthos, and he embraced D'Artagnan with so much friendship as to deprive the musketeer of his breath for 5 minutes. Why, you are stronger than ever, said D'Artagnan, and still, happily, in your arms. Porthos saluted D'Artagnan with a gracious smile. During the 5 minutes D'Artagnan was recovering his breath, he reflected that he had a very difficult part to play. It was necessary that he always should question and never reply. By the time his respiration returned, he had fixed his plans for the campaign. Chapter 70, wherein the ideas of D'Artagnan, at first strangely clouded, begin to clear up a little. D'Artagnan immediately took the offensive. Now that I have told you all, dear friend, or rather now you have guessed all, tell me what you are doing here, covered with dust and mud. Porthos wiped his brow and looked around him with pride. Why, it appears, said he, that you may see what I am doing here. No doubt, you lift great stones. Oh, to show these idle fellows what a man is, said Porthos with contempt. But you understand. Yes, that it is not your place to lift stones, although there are many whose place it is, who cannot lift them as you do. It was that which made me ask you, just now, what are you doing here, Baron? I am studying topography, Chevalier. You are studying topography. Yes, but what are you doing in that common dress? D'Artagnan perceived he had committed a fault in giving expression to his astonishment. Porthos had taken advantage of it to retort with a question. Why, said he, you know I am a bourgeois. In fact, my dress, then has nothing astonishing in it, since it conforms with my condition. Nonsense. You are a musketeer. You are wrong, my friend. I have given in my resignation. Bow! Oh, Monday you. Yes. And have you abandoned the service? I have quitted it. You have abandoned the king. Quite. Porthos raised his arms towards heaven, like a man who has heard extraordinary news. Well, that does confound me, said he. It is nevertheless true. And what led you to form such a resolution? The king displeased me. Mazarin had disgusted me for a long time, as you know, so I threw my cassock to the nettles. But Mazarin is dead. I know that well enough. Parbleu. Only, at the period of his death, my resignation had been given in and accepted 2 months. Then, feeling myself free, I set off for Pierrefonds to see my friend Porthos. I had heard talk of the happy division you had made of your time, and I wished, for a fortnight, to divide mine after your fashion. My friend, you know that it is not for a fortnight my house is open to you. It is for a year, for 10 years, for life. Thank you, Porthos. Ah, but perhaps you want money, do you? Said Porthos, making something like 50 louis chink in his pocket. In that case, you know. No, thank you. I am not in want of anything. I place my savings with Planchet, who pays me the interest of them. Your savings? Yes, to be sure, said D'Artagnan. Why should I not put by my savings, as well as another Porthos? Oh, there is no reason why. On the contrary, I always suspected you. That is to say, Aramis always suspected you to have savings. For my own part, D.C., I take no concern about the management of my household, but I presume the savings of a musketeer must be small. No doubt, relative to yourself, Porthos, who are a millionaire, but you shall judge. I had laid by 25,000 livres. That's pretty well, said Porthos, with an affable air, and, continued D'Artagnan, on the 28th of last month I added to it 200,000 livres more. Porthos opened his large eyes, which eloquently demanded of the musketeer, "Where the devil did you steal such a sum as that, my dear friend?" 200,000 livres, cried he, at length. Yes, which, with the 25 I had, and 20,000 I have about me, complete the sum of 245,000 livres. But tell me, whence comes this fortune? I will tell you all about it presently, dear friend. But as you have, in the first place, many things to tell me yourself, let us have my recital in its proper order. Bravo, said Porthos. Then we are both rich. But what can I have to relate to you? You have to relate to me how Aramis came to be named. Ah, Bishop of Vannes. That's it, said D'Artagnan, Bishop of Vannes. Dear Aramis, do you know how he succeeded so well? Yes, without reckoning that he does not mean to stop there. What? Do you mean he will not be contented with violet stockings, and that he wants a red hat? Hush, that is promise him. Bow. By the king? By somebody more powerful than the king. Ah, the devil. Porthos, what incredible things you tell me, my friend. Why incredible? Is there not always somebody in France more powerful than the king? Oh, yes. In the time of King Louis XIII, it was Cardinal Richelieu. In the time of the Regency, it was Cardinal Mazarin. In the time of Louis XIV, it is M. Go on. It is M. Fouquet. Jove, you have hit it the first time. So, then, I suppose it is M. Fouquet who has promised Aramis the red hat. Porthos assumed an air of reserve. Dear friend, said he, God preserve me from meddling with the affairs of others, above all from revealing secrets it may be to their interest to keep. When you see Aramis, he will tell you all he thinks he ought to tell you. You are right, Porthos, and you are quite a padlock for safety. But to revert to yourself. Yes, said Porthos. You said just now you came hither to study topography. I did so. Shoot you, my friend, what fine things you will do. How do you mean? Why, these fortifications are admirable. Is that your opinion? Decidedly it is, in truth. To anything but a regular siege, Belle Isle is absolutely impregnable. Porthos rubbed his hands. That is my opinion, said he. But who the devil has fortified this paltry little place in this manner? Porthos drew himself up proudly. Did not I tell you? No. Do you not suspect? No. All I can say is that he is a man who has studied all the systems, and who appears to me to have stopped at the best. Hush, said Porthos. Consider my modesty, my dear D'Artagnan. In truth, replied the Musketeer, can it be you who... Oh, pray, my dear friend, you who have imagined, traced, and combined between these bastions, these redans, these curtains, these half-moons, and are preparing that covered way. I beg you, you who have built that lunette with its retiring angles and its salient angles. My friend, you who have given that inclination to the openings of your embrasures, by means of which you so effectively protect the men who serve the guns. Hey, mon Dieu, yes. Oh, Porthos, Porthos, I must bow down before you, I must admire you, but you have always concealed from us this superb, this incomparable genius. I hope, my dear friend, you will show me all this in detail. Nothing more easy. Here lies my original sketch, my plan. Show it me. Porthos led D'Artagnan towards a stone that served him for a table, and upon which the plan was spread. At the foot of the plan was written, in the formidable writing of Porthos, writing of which we have already had occasion to speak. Instead of making use of a square or rectangle, as has been done to this time, you will suppose your place enclosed in a regular hexagon, this polygon having the advantage of offering more angles than the quadrilateral one. Every side of your hexagon, of which you will determine the length in proportion to the dimensions taken upon the place, will be divided into two parts, and upon the middle point you will elevate a perpendicular towards the center of the polygon, which will equal in length the sixth part of the side. By the extremities of each side of the polygon, you will trace two diagonals, which will cut the perpendicular. These will form the precise lines of your defense. The devil, said D'Artagnan, stopping at this point of the demonstration. Why, this is a complete system, Porthos. Entirely, said Porthos. Continue. No, I have read enough of it, but since it is you, my dear Porthos, who direct the works, what need have you of setting down your system so formally in writing? Oh, my dear friend, death? How? Death? Why, we are all mortal, are we not? That is true, said D'Artagnan. You have a reply for everything, my friend. And he replaced the plan upon the stone. But however short the time he had the plan in his hands, D'Artagnan had been able to distinguish, under the enormous writing of Porthos, a much more delicate hand, which reminded him of certain letters to Marie Michon, with which he had been acquainted in his youth. Only the India rubber had passed and repassed so often over this writing that it might have escaped a less practiced eye than that of our musketeer. Bravo, my friend, bravo, said D'Artagnan. And now you know all that you want to know, do you not? Said Porthos, wheeling about. More do you? Yes, only do me one last favor, dear friend. Speak, I am master here. Do me the pleasure to tell me the name of that gentleman who is walking yonder. Where? There. Behind the soldiers. Followed by a lackey. Exactly. In company with a mean sort of a fellow, dressed in black. Yes, I mean him. That is M. Guittard. And who is Guittard, my friend? He is the architect of the house. Of what house? Of M. Fouquet's house. Ah, cried D'Artagnan. You are of the household of M. Fouquet, then Porthos? Aye. What do you mean by that? said the topographer, blushing to the top of his ears. Why, you say the house, when speaking of Belle-Isle, as if you were speaking of the shadow of Pyriphons. Porthos bit his lips. Belle-Isle, my friend, said he, belongs to M. Fouquet, does it not? Yes, I believe so. As Pyriphons belongs to me. I told you I believe so. There are no two words to that. Did you ever see a man there who was accustomed to walk about with a ruler in his hand? No, but I might have seen him there, if he really walked there. Well, that gentleman is M. Boulingrin. Who is M. Boulingrin? Now, we are coming to it. If, when this gentleman is walking with a ruler in his hand, anyone should ask me, who is M. Boulingrin? I should reply, he is the architect of the house. Well, M. Guettard is the Boulingrin of M. Fouquet, but he has nothing to do with the fortifications, which are my department alone. Do you understand? Mine, absolutely mine. Ah, Porthos, cried D'Artagnan, letting his arms fall as a conquered man gives up his sword. Ah, my friend, you are not only a Herculean topographer, you are, still further, a dialectician of the first water. Is it not powerfully reasoned? Said Porthos, and he puffed and blew like the conga which D'Artagnan had let slip from his hand. And now, said D'Artagnan, that shadow-looking man, who accompanies Guettard, is he also of the household of M. Fouquet? Oh, yes, said Porthos, with contempt. It is one M. Jupenet, or Jupinet, a sort of poet, who is come to establish himself here. I believe so. I thought M. Fouquet had poets enough. Yonder, Scudery, Lauret, Pelisson, La Fontaine. If I must tell you the truth, Porthos, that poet disgraces you. Ay, my friend, but what saves us is that he is not here as a poet. As what, then, is he? As printer. And you make me remember, I have a word to say to the Quista. Say it, then. Porthos made a sign to Jupenet, who perfectly recollected D'Artagnan, and did not care to come nearer, which naturally produced another sign from Porthos. This was so imperative, he was obliged to obey. As he approached, "Come hither," said Porthos. "You only landed yesterday, and you have begun your tricks already." "How so, Monsieur le Baron?" asked Jupenet, trembling. "Your press was groaning all night, monsieur," said Porthos, "and you prevented my sleeping. Corne de boeuf." "Monsieur," objected Jupenet timidly, "you have nothing yet to print. Therefore you have no occasion to set your press going. What did you print last night?" "Monsieur, a light poem of my own composition." "Light? No, no, monsieur. The press groaned pitifully beneath it. Let it not happen again. Do you understand?" "Yes, monsieur." "You promise me?" "I do, monsieur." "Very well. This time I pardon you. Adieu." "Well, now we have combed that fellow's head, let us breakfast." "Yes," replied D'Artagnan, "let us breakfast." "Only," said Porthos, "I beg you to observe, my friend, that we have only 2 hours for our repast." "What would you have? We will try to make 2 hours suffice." "But why have you only 2 hours?" "Because it is high tide at 1 o'clock, and, with the tide, I am going to Vannes. But, as I shall return tomorrow, my dear friend, you can stay here. You shall be master. I have a good cook and a good cellar." "No," interrupted D'Artagnan. "Better than that." "What?" "You are going to Vannes, you say." "To a certainty." "To see Aramis." "Yes." "Well, I came from Paris on purpose to see Aramis." "That's true. I will go with you then." "Do. That's the thing. Only, I ought to have seen Aramis first, and you after. But man proposes, and God disposes. I have begun with you, and will finish with Aramis." "Very well. And in how many hours can you go from here to Vannes?" "Oh, pardieu, in 6 hours. 3 hours by sea to Sazo, 3 hours by road from Sazo to Vannes. How convenient that is, being so near to the bishopric. Do you often go to Vannes? Yes, once a week. But stop till I get my plan. Porthos picked up his plan, folded it carefully, and engulfed it in his large pocket. Good, said D'Artagnan aside. I think I now know the real engineer who is fortifying Belle Isle. 2 hours after, at high tide, Porthos and D'Artagnan set out for Sazo. Chapter 71. A procession at Vannes. The passage from Belle Isle to Sazo was made rapidly enough, thanks to one of those little corsairs of which D'Artagnan had been told during his voyage, and which, shaped for fast sailing and destined for the chase, was sheltered at that time in the roadstead of Maria, where one of them, with a quarter of its war crew, performed duty between Belle Isle and the continent. D'Artagnan had an opportunity of convincing himself that Porthos, though engineer and topographer, was not deeply versed in affairs of state. His perfect ignorance, with any other, might have passed for well-informed dissimulation. But D'Artagnan knew too well all the folds and refolds of his Porthos not to find a secret if there were one there, like those regular, minute-old bachelors who know how to find, with their eyes shut, each book on the shelves of their library and each piece of linen in their wardrobe. So if he had found nothing, our cunning D'Artagnan, in rolling and unrolling his Porthos, it was because, in truth, there was nothing to be found. Be it so, said D'Artagnan. I shall get to no more Vannes in half an hour than Porthos has discovered at Belle Isle in 2 months. Only, in order that I may know something, it is important that Porthos should not make use of the only stratagem I leave at his disposal. He must not warn Aramis of my arrival. All the care of the musketeer was then, for the moment, confined to the watching of Porthos. And let us hasten to say, Porthos did not deserve all this mistrust. Porthos thought of no evil. Perhaps, on first seeing him, D'Artagnan had inspired him with a little suspicion, but almost immediately D'Artagnan had reconquered in that good and brave heart the place he had always occupied, and not the least cloud darkened the large eye of Porthos, fixed from time to time with tenderness on his friend. On landing, Porthos inquired if his horses were waiting, and soon perceived them at the crossing of the road that winds round Sazo, and which, without passing through that little city, leads towards Vannes. These horses were 2 in number, one for Vallon, and one for his equerry, for Porthos had an equerry since Mouston was only able to use a carriage as a means of locomotion. D'Artagnan expected that Porthos would propose to send forward his equerry upon one horse to bring back another, and he, D'Artagnan, had made up his mind to oppose this proposition. But nothing D'Artagnan had expected happened. Porthos simply told the equerry to dismount and await his return at Sazo, whilst D'Artagnan would ride his horse, which was arranged. "Hey, but you are quite a man of precaution, my dear Porthos," said D'Artagnan to his friend when he found himself in the saddle upon the equerry's horse. "Yes, but this is a kindness on the part of Aramis. I have not my stud here, and Aramis has placed his stables at my disposal." "Good horses for bishop's horses, mordieu," said D'Artagnan. "It is true, Aramis is a bishop of a peculiar kind." "He is a holy man," replied Porthos, in a tone almost nasal, and with his eyes raised towards heaven. "Then he is much changed," said D'Artagnan. "You and I have known him possibly profane." "Grace has touched him," said Porthos. "Bravo," said D'Artagnan. "That redoubles my desire to see my dear old friend." And he spurred his horse, which sprang off into a more rapid pace. "Peste," said Porthos. "If we go on at this rate, we shall only take 1 hour instead of 2. To go how far, do you say, Porthos? 4 leagues and a half. That will be a good pace. I could have embarked you on the canal, but the devil take rowers and boat horses. The first are like tortoises, the second like snails, and when a man is able to put a good horse between his knees, that horse is better than rowers or any other means." "You are right. You above all, Porthos, who always look magnificent on horseback." "Rather heavy, my friend. I was weighed the other day." "And what do you weigh?" 300 weight, said Porthos, proudly. "Bravo." So that you must perceive, I am forced to choose horses whose loins are straight and wide, otherwise I break them down in 2 hours. Yes, giant's horses you must have, must you not? You are very polite, my friend, replied the engineer, with affectionate majesty. As a case in point, replied D'Artagnan, your horse seems to sweat already. Dame, it is hot. Ah, do you see Vannes now? Yes, perfectly. It is a handsome city, apparently. Charming, according to Aramis, at least, but I think it black. But black seems to be considered handsome by artists. I am sorry for it. Why so, Porthos? Because I have lately had my shadow of Pierrefonds, which was grey with age, plastered white. Said D'Artagnan, and white is more cheerful. Yes, but it is less august, as Aramis tells me. Fortunately, there are dealers in black as well as white. I will have Pierrefonds replastered in black. That's all there is about it. If grey is handsome, you understand, my friend, black must be superb. Dame, said D'Artagnan, that appears logical. Will you never advance, D'Artagnan? Never. Then you know nothing of the city. Nothing. Well, look, said Porthos, raising himself in his stirrups, which made the 4/4 of his horse bend sadly. Do you see that corner, in the sun, yonder? Yes, I see it plainly. Well, that is a cathedral, which is called Saint Pierre. Now look again, in the faubourg on the left. Do you see another cross? Perfectly well. That is Saint Patone, the parish preferred by Aramis. Indeed. Without doubt. Saint Patone, you see, passes for having been the first bishop of Vannes. It is true that Aramis pretends he was not, but he is so learned that may be only a paradox, said D'Artagnan. Precisely. Thank you. My tongue trips. I'm so hot. My friend, said D'Artagnan, continue your interesting description. I beg. What is that large white building with many windows? Oh, that is the College of the Jesuits. Pardieu, you have an apt hand. Do you see, close to the college, a large house with steeples, turrets, built in a handsome Gothic style, as that fool, M. Guittard, says? Yes, that is plainly to be seen. Well, that is where Aramis resides. What? Does he not reside at the episcopal palace? No, that is in ruins. The palace likewise is in the city, and Aramis prefers the faubourgs. That is why, as I told you, he is partial to Saint Paterne. Saint Paterne is in the faubourg. Besides, there are in this faubourg a mall, a tennis court, and a house of Dominicans. Look, that where the handsome steeple rises to the heavens. Well, next, you see the faubourg is like a separate city. It has its walls, its towers, its ditches. The quay is upon it likewise, and the boats land at the quay. If our little corsair did not draw 8 feet of water, we could have come full sail up to Aramis's windows. Porthos, cried D'Artagnan, you are a well of knowledge, a spring of ingenious and profound reflections. Porthos, you no longer surprise me, you confound me. Here we are, said Porthos, turning the conversation with his usual modesty. And high time we were, thought D'Artagnan, for Aramis's horse is melting away like a steed of ice. They entered almost at the same instant the faubourg, but scarcely had they gone 100 paces when they were surprised to find the streets strewed with leaves and flowers. Against the old walls of Vannes hung the oldest and the strangest tapestries of France. From over balconies fell long white sheets stuck all over with bouquets. The streets were deserted. It was plain the entire population was assembled on one point. The blinds were closed, and the breeze penetrated into the houses under the hangings, which cast long, black shades between their places of issue and the walls. Suddenly, at the turning of a street, chance struck the ears of the newly arrived travelers. A crowd in holiday garb appeared through the vapors of incense which mounted to the heavens in blue fleeces, and clouds of rose leaves fluttered as high as the first stories. Above all heads were to be seen the cross and banners, the sacred symbols of religion. Then, beneath these crosses and banners, as if protected by them, walked a whole world of young girls clothed in white, crowned with cornflowers. At the two sides of the street, ink losing the cordage, marched the guards of the garrison, carrying bouquets in the barrels of their muskets and on the points of their lances. This was the procession, whilst D'Artagnan and Porthos were looking on with critical glances, which disguised an extreme impatience to get forward. A magnificent day's approach preceded by 100 Jesuits and 100 Dominicans, and escorted by 2 archdeacons, a treasurer, a penitent, and 12 canons. A singer with a thundering voice, a man certainly picked out from all the voices of France, as was a drum major of the imperial guard from all the giants of the empire, escorted by 4 other chanters, who appeared to be there only to serve him as an accompaniment, made the air resound, and the windows of the houses vibrate. Under the dais appeared a pale and noble countenance with black eyes, black hair streaked with threads of white, a delicate, compressed mouth, a prominent and angular chin. His head, full of graceful majesty, was covered with the episcopal mitre, a headdress which gave it, in addition to the character of sovereignty, that of asceticism and evangelic meditation. "Aramis!" cried the musketeer, involuntarily, as this lofty countenance passed before him. The prelate started at the sound of the voice. He raised his large black eyes, with their long lashes, and turned them without hesitation towards the spot whence the exclamation proceeded. At a glance, he saw Porthos and D'Artagnan close to him. On his part, D'Artagnan, thanks to the keenness of his sight, had seen all, sees all. The full portrait of the prelate had entered his memory, never to leave it. One thing had particularly struck D'Artagnan. On perceiving him, Aramis had colored. Then he had concentrated under his eyelids the fire of the look of the master and the indefinable affection of the friend. It was evident that Aramis had asked himself this question: why is D'Artagnan with Porthos, and what does he want at Vannes? Aramis comprehended all that was passing in the mind of D'Artagnan on turning his look upon him again, and seeing that he had not lowered his eyes. He knew the acuteness and intelligence of his friend. He feared to let him divine the secret of his blush and his astonishment. He was still the same Aramis, always having a secret to conceal. Therefore, to put an end to his look of an inquisitor, which it was necessary to get rid of at all events, as, at any price, a general extinguishes a battery which annoys him, Aramis stretched forth his beautiful white hand, upon which sparkled the amethyst of the pastoral ring. He cut the air with sign of the cross, and poured out his benediction upon his 2 friends. Perhaps thoughtful and absent, D'Artagnan, impious in spite of himself, might not have bent beneath his holy benediction, but Porthos saw his distraction, and laying his friendly hand upon the back of his companion, he crushed him down towards the earth. D'Artagnan was forced to give way. Indeed, he was little short of being flat on the ground. In the meantime, Aramis had passed. D'Artagnan, like Antæus, had only touched the ground, and he turned towards Porthos, almost angry. But there was no mistaking the intention of the brave Hercules. It was a feeling of religious propriety that had influenced him. Besides, speech with Porthos, instead of disguising his thought, always completed it. "It is very polite of him," said he, "to have given his benediction to us alone. Decidedly, he is a holy man and a brave man." Less convinced than Porthos, D'Artagnan made no reply. "Observe, my friend," continued Porthos, "he has seen us, and, instead of continuing to walk on at the simple pace of the procession, as he did just now, see, what a hurry he is in. Do you see how the cortege is increasing its speed? He is eager to join us and embrace us. Is that dear Aramis?" "That is true," replied D'Artagnan, aloud, then to himself, "It is equally true he has seen me, the fox, and will have time to prepare himself to receive me." But the procession had passed. The road was free. D'Artagnan and Porthos walked straight up to the episcopal palace, which was surrounded by a numerous crowd anxious to see the prelate return. D'Artagnan remarked that this crowd was composed principally of citizens and military men. He recognized in the nature of these partisans the address of his friend. Aramis was not the man to seek for a useless popularity. He cared very little for being beloved by people who could be of no service to him. Women, children, and old men, that is to say, the cottage of ordinary pastors, was not the cottage for him. 10 minutes after the two friends had passed the threshold of the palace, Aramis returned like a triumphant conqueror. The soldiers presented arms to him as to a superior. The citizens bowed to him as to a friend and a patron, rather than as a head of the church. There was something in Aramis resembling those Roman senators who had their doors always surrounded by clients. At the foot of the prison, he had a conference of half a minute with a Jesuit, who, in order to speak to him more secretly, passed his head under the dais. He then re-entered his palace. The doors closed slowly, and the crowd melted away, whilst chants and prayers were still resounding abroad. It was a magnificent day. Earthly perfumes were mingled with the perfumes of the air and the sea. The city breathed happiness, joy, and strength. D'Artagnan felt something like the presence of an invisible hand which had, all-powerfully, created this strength, this joy, this happiness, and spread everywhere these perfumes. "Oh, oh," said he, "Porthos has got fat, but Aramis has grown taller." Chapter 72. The grandeur of the Bishop of Vannes. Porthos and D'Artagnan had entered the bishop's residence by a private door as his personal friends. Of course, Porthos served D'Artagnan as guide. The worthy baron comported himself everywhere rather as if he were at home. Nevertheless, whether it was a tacit acknowledgment of the sanctity of the personage of Aramis and his character, or the habit of respecting him who imposed upon him morally, a worthy habit which had always made Porthos a model soldier and an excellent companion. For all these reasons, say we, Porthos preserved in the palace of his greatness the Bishop of Vannes a sort of reserve which D'Artagnan remarked at once, in the attitude he took with respect to the valets and officers. And yet this reserve did not go so far as to prevent his asking questions. Porthos questioned. They learned that his greatness had just returned to his apartment, and was preparing to appear in familiar intimacy, less majestic than he had appeared with his flock. After a quarter of an hour, which D'Artagnan and Porthos passed in looking mutually at each other with the white of their eyes, and turning their thumbs in all the different evolutions which go from north to south, a door of the chamber opened, and his greatness appeared, dressed in the undress, complete, of a prelate. Aramis carried his head high, like a man accustomed to command. His violet robe was tucked up on one side, and his white hand was on his hip. He had retained the fine mustache, and the lengthened royal of the time of Louis XIII. He exhaled, on entering, that delicate perfume which, among elegant men and women of high fashion, never changes, and appears to be incorporated in the person, of whom it has become the natural emanation. In this case only, the perfume had retained something of the religious sublimity of incense. It no longer intoxicated, it penetrated. It no longer inspired desire, it inspired respect. Aramis, on entering the chamber, did not hesitate an instant, and without pronouncing one word, which, whatever it might be, would have been cold on such an occasion, he went straight up to the musketeer, so well disguised under the costume of M. Agnan, and pressed him in his arms with a tenderness which the most distrustful could not have suspected of coldness or affectation. D'Artagnan, on his part, embraced him with equal ardor. Porthos pressed the delicate hand of Aramis in his immense hands, and D'Artagnan remarked that his greatness gave him his left hand, probably from habit, seeing that Porthos already 10 times had been injuring his fingers covered with rings by pounding his flesh in the vice of his fist. Worn by the pain, Aramis was cautious, and only presented flesh to be bruised, and not fingers to be crushed, against gold or the angles of diamonds. Between two embraces, Aramis looked D'Artagnan in the face, offered him a chair, sitting down himself in the shade, observing that the light fell full upon the face of his interlocutor. This maneuver, familiar to diplomatists and women, resembles much the advantage of the guard which, according to their skill or habit, combatants endeavor to take on the ground at a duel. D'Artagnan was not the dupe of this maneuver, but he did not appear to perceive it. He felt himself caught, but precisely because he was caught, he felt himself on the road to discovery, and it little imported to him, old condottiere as he was, to be beaten in appearance, provided he drew from his pretended defeat the advantages of victory. Aramis began the conversation. "Ah, "Dear friend, my good D'Artagnan," said he, "what an excellent chance." "It is a chance, my reverend companion," said D'Artagnan, "that I will call friendship. I seek you, as I always have sought you, when I had any grand enterprise to propose to you, or some hours of liberty to give you." "Ah, indeed," said Aramis, without explosion, "you have been seeking me." "Hey!" "Yes, he has been seeking you, Aramis," said Porthos, "and the proof is that he has unharbored me at Belle Isle. That is amiable, is it not?" "Ah, yes," said Aramis, "at Belle Isle? Certainly." "Good," said D'Artagnan. "There's my booby Porthos, without thinking of it, has fired the first cannon of attack." "At Belle Isle," said Aramis, "in that hole, in that desert. That is kind, indeed." "And it was I who told him you were at Vannes," continued Porthos in the same tone. D'Artagnan armed his mouth with a finesse almost ironical. "Yes, I knew, but I was willing to see," replied he. "To see what?" "If our old friendship still held out, if, on seeing each other, our hearts, hardened as they are by age, would still let the old cry of joy escape, which salutes the coming of a friend." "Well, and you must have been satisfied," said Aramis. So, how is that?" "Yes," Porthos said, "hush." "And you?" "Well, and I." "And you gave me your benediction." "What would you have, my friend?" said Aramis, smiling. "That is the most precious thing that a poor prelate, like me, has to give." "Indeed, my dear friend." "Doubtless. And yet they say at Paris that the bishopric of Vannes is one of the best in France." "Ah, you are now speaking of temporal wealth," said Aramis, with a careless air. "To be sure, I wish to speak of that. I hold by it, on my part." "In that case, let me speak of it," said Aramis, with a smile. "You own yourself to be one of the richest prelates in France." "My friend, since you ask me to give you an account, I will tell you that the bishopric of Vannes is worth about 20,000 livres a year, neither more nor less. It is a diocese which contains 160 parishes." "That is very pretty," said D'Artagnan. "It is superb," said Porthos. "And yet," resumed D'Artagnan, throwing his eyes over Aramis, "you don't mean to bury yourself here forever." "Pardon me, only I do not admit the word bury. But it seems to me that at this distance from Paris a man is buried, or nearly so." "My friend, I am getting old," said Aramis. "The noise and bustle of a city no longer suit me. At 57 we ought to seek calm and meditation. I have found them here. What is there more beautiful, and stern at the same time, than this old Amorica? I find here, dear D'Artagnan, all that is opposite to what I formerly loved, and that is what must happen at the end of life, which is opposite to the beginning. A little of my odd pleasure of former times still comes to salute me here, now and then, without diverting me from the road of salvation. I am still of this world, and yet every step that I take brings me nearer to God. Eloquent, wise, and discreet, you are an accomplished prelate, Aramis, and I offer you my congratulations." "But," said Aramis, smiling, "you did not come here only for the purpose of paying me compliments. Speak, what brings you hither? May it be that, in some fashion or other, you want me?" "Thank God, no, my friend," said D'Artagnan. "It is nothing of that kind, Dot. I am rich and free." "Rich!" exclaimed Aramis. "Yes, rich for me, not for you or Porthos. Understand. I have an income of about 15,000 livres." Aramis looked at him suspiciously. He could not believe, particularly on seeing his friend in such humble guise, that he had made so fine a fortune. Then D'Artagnan, seeing that the hour of explanations was come, related the history of his English adventures. During the recital he saw, 10 times, the eyes of the prelate sparkle, and his slender fingers worked convulsively. As to Porthos, it was not admiration he manifested for D'Artagnan. It was enthusiasm, it was delirium. When D'Artagnan had finished, "Well," said Aramis. "Well," said D'Artagnan. "You see, then, I have in England friends and property, in France a treasure. If your heart tells you so, I offer them to you. That is what I came here for." However firm was his look, he could not this time support the look of Aramis. He allowed, therefore, his eye to stray upon Porthos, like the sword which yields to too powerful a pressure, and seeks another road. "At all events," said the bishop, "you have assumed a singular travelling costume, old friend." "Frightful. I know it is. You may understand why I would not travel as a cavalier or a noble, since I became rich. I am miserly." "And you say, then, you came to Belle Isle," said Aramis, without transition. "Yes," replied D'Artagnan. "I knew I should find you and Porthos there." "Find me?" cried Aramis. "Me? For the last year past I have not once crossed the sea." "Oh," said D'Artagnan, "I should never have supposed you such a housekeeper." "Ah, dear friend, I must tell you that I am no longer the Aramis of former times. Riding on horseback is unpleasant to me. The sea fatigues me. I am a poor, ailing priest, always complaining, always grumbling, and inclined to the austerities which appear to accord with old age, preliminary parleyings with death. I linger, my dear D'Artagnan, I linger. Well, that is all the better, my friend, for we shall probably be neighbors soon." "Bow!" said Aramis with a degree of surprise he did not even seek to dissemble. "You my neighbor? More to you?" "Yes." "How so?" "I'm about to purchase some very profitable salt mines, which are situated between Piriel and Croisic. Imagine, my friend, a clear profit of 12%. Never any deficiency, never any idle expenses. The ocean, faithful and regular, brings every 12 hours as contingency to my coffers. I am the first Parisian who has dreamt of such a speculation. Do not say anything about it, I beg of you, and in a short time we will communicate on the matter. I am to have 3 leagues of country for 30,000 livres." Aramis darted a look at Porthos, as if to ask if all this were true, if some snare were not concealed beneath this outward indifference. But soon, as if ashamed of having consulted this poor auxiliary, he collected all his forces for a fresh assault and new defense. "I heard that you had some difference with the court, but that you had come out of it as you know how to get through everything, D'Artagnan, with the honors of war." "I," said the Musketeer, with a burst of laughter that did not conceal his embarrassment, for, from these words, Aramis was not unlikely to be acquainted with his last relations with the king. "I? Oh, tell me all about that, pray, Aramis." "Yes, it was related to me, a poor bishop, lost in the middle of the lands, that the king had taken you as a confidant of his MOs." "With whom?" "With Mademoiselle de Mancini." D'Artagnan breathed freely again. "Ah, I don't say no to that," replied he. "It appears that the king took you one morning over the bridge of Blois to talk with his lady-love." "That's true," said D'Artagnan. "And you know that, do you? Well, then, you must know that the same day I gave him my resignation." "What, sincerely?" "Nothing more so." "It was after that, then, that you went to the Comte de la Fere's." "Yes." "Afterwards to me." "Yes." "And then Porthos." "Yes." "Was it in order to pay us a simple visit?" "No. I did not know you were engaged, and I wished to take you with me into England." "Yes, I understand. And then you executed alone, wonderful man as you are, what you wanted to propose to us all four. I suspected you had something to do with that famous restoration, when I learned that you had been seen at King Charles's receptions, and that he appeared to treat you like a friend, or rather like a person to whom he was under an obligation." "But how the devil did you learn all that?" asked D'Artagnan, who began to fear that the investigation of Aramis had extended further than he wished. "Dear D'Artagnan," said the prelate, "my friendship resembles, in a degree, the solicitude of that night watch whom we have in the little tower of the Mole at the extremity of the quay. That brave man, every night, lights a lantern to direct the barks that come from sea. He is concealed in his sentry box, and the fishermen do not see him, but he follows them with interest. He divines them, he calls them, he attracts them into the way to the port. I resemble this watcher. From time to time some news reaches me, and recalls in my remembrance all those I loved. Then I follow the friends of old days over the stormy ocean of the world. I, a poor watcher, to whom God has kindly given the shelter of a sentry box. Well, what did I do when I came from England? Ah, there, replied Aramis. You get beyond my depth. I know nothing of you since your return. D'Artagnan, my eyes are dim. I regretted you did not think of me. I wept over your forgetfulness. I was wrong. I see you again, and it is a festival, a great festival, I assure you, solemnly. How is Athos? Very well, thank you. And our young pupil, Raoul? He seems to have inherited the skill of his father, Athos, and the strength of his tutor, Porthos. And on what occasion have you been able to judge of that? Hey, mon Dieu, on the eve of my departure from Paris. Indeed? Tell me all about it. Yes, there was an execution at the Greve, and in consequence of that execution, a riot. We happened by accident to be in the riot, and in this riot we were obliged to have recourse to our swords. And he did wonders. Bah! What did he do? Why, in the first place, he threw a man out of the window, as he would have flung a sackful of flock. Come, that's pretty well, said Porthos. Then he drew and cut and thrust away, as we fellows used to do in the good old times. And what was the cause of this riot? Said Porthos. D'Artagnan remarked upon the face of Aramis a complete indifference to this question of Porthos. Why, said he, fixing his eyes upon Aramis, on account of two farmers of the revenues, friends of M. Fouquet, whom the king forced to disgorge their plunder, and then hanged them. A scarcely perceptible contraction of the prelate's brow showed that he had heard D'Artagnan's reply. Oh, said Porthos, and what were the names of these friends of M. Fouquet? M. Demaris and Liadet, said D'Artagnan. Do you know those names? Aramis. No, said the prelate, disdainfully. They sound like the names of financiers. Exactly, so they were. Oh, M. Fouquet allows his friends to be hanged. Then, said Porthos. And why not? Said Aramis. Why, it seems to me, if these culprits were hanged, it was by order of the king. Now M. Fouquet, although superintendent of the finances, has not, I believe, the right of life and death. That may be, said Porthos, but in the place of M. Fouquet. Aramis was afraid Porthos was about to say something awkward, so interrupted him. Come, D'Artagnan, said he, this is quite enough about other people. Let us talk a little about you. Of me you know all that I can tell you. On the contrary, let me hear a little about you, Aramis. I have told you, my friend, there is nothing of Aramis left in me, nor of the Abbé d'Herblay even. No, not even of him. You see a man whom Providence has taken by the hand, whom he has conducted to a position that he could never have dared even to hope for. Providence? Asked D'Artagnan. Yes. Well, that is strange. I was told it was M. Fouquet. Who told you that? Cried Aramis, without being able, with all the power of his will, to prevent the color rising to his cheeks. Ma voi. Why, Bazine. The fool. I do not say he is a man of genius. It is true, but he told me so, and after him I repeat it to you. I have never seen M. Fouquet, replied Aramis with a look as pure and calm as that of a virgin who has never told a lie. Well, but if you had seen him and known him, there is no harm in that, replied D'Artagnan. M. Fouquet is a very good sort of man. Humph! A great politician. Aramis made a gesture of indifference. An all-powerful minister. I only hold to the king and the pope. Dame, listen then, said D'Artagnan, in the most natural tone imaginable. I said that because everybody here sways by M. Fouquet. The plain is M. Fouquet's, The salt mines I'm about to buy are Amphiques. The island in which Porthos studies topography is Amphiques. The galleys are Amphiques. I confess, then, that nothing would have surprised me in your enfeoffment, or rather in that of your diocese, to Amphique. He is a different master from the king, that is all, but quite as powerful as Louis. Thank God, I am not vassal to anybody. I belong to nobody, and am entirely my own master, replied Aramis, who, during this conversation, followed with his eye every gesture of D'Artagnan, every glance of Porthos. But D'Artagnan was impassible and Porthos motionless. The thrusts aimed so skillfully were parried by an able adversary. Not one hit the mark. Nevertheless, both began to feel the fatigue of such a contest, and the announcement of supper was well received by everybody. Supper changed the course of conversation. Besides, they felt that, upon their guard as each one had been, they could neither of them boast of having the advantage. Porthos had understood nothing of what had been meant. He had held himself motionless, because Aramis had made him a sign not to stir. Supper for him was nothing but supper, but that was quite enough for Porthos. The supper, then, went off very well. D'Artagnan was in high spirits. Aramis exceeded himself in kind affability. Porthos ate like old Pelops. Their talk was of war, finance, the arts, and love. Aramis played astonishment at every word of politics. D'Artagnan risked. This long series of surprises increased the mistrust of D'Artagnan, as the eternal indifference of D'Artagnan provoked the suspicions of Aramis. At length D'Artagnan, designedly, uttered the name of Colbert. He had reserved that stroke for the last. "Who is this Colbert?" asked the bishop. "Oh, come," said D'Artagnan to himself, "that is too strong. We must be careful. Mordioux, we must be careful." And he then gave Aramis all the information respecting M. Colbert he could desire. The supper, or rather, the conversation, was prolonged till 1 o'clock in the morning between D'Artagnan and Aramis. At 10 o'clock precisely, Porthos had fallen asleep in his chair and snored like an organ. At midnight he woke up, and they sent him to bed. Said he, "I was near falling asleep, but that was all very interesting you were talking about." At 1 o'clock Aramis conducted D'Artagnan to the chamber destined for him, which was the best in the episcopal residence. 2 servants were placed at his command. "Tomorrow, at 8 o'clock," said he, taking leave of D'Artagnan, "we will take, if agreeable to you, a ride on horseback with Porthos." "At 8 o'clock," said D'Artagnan. "So late?" "You know that I require 7 hours' sleep," said Aramis. "That is true. Good night, dear friend." And he embraced the musketeer cordially. D'Artagnan allowed him to depart. Then, as soon as the door closed, "Good," cried he, "at 5 o'clock I will be on foot." This determination being made, he went to bed and quietly put 2 and 2 together, as people say. Chapter 73, in which Porthos begins to be sorry for having come with D'Artagnan. Scarcely had D'Artagnan extinguished his taper, when Aramis, who had watched through his curtains the last glimmer of light in his friend's apartment, traversed the corridor on tiptoe and went to Porthos's room. The giant, who had been in bed nearly an hour and a half, lay grandly stretched out on the down bed. He was in the happy calm of the first sleep, which, with Porthos, resisted the noise of bells or the report of cannon. His head swam in that soft oscillation which reminds us of the soothing movement of a ship. In a moment Porthos would have begun to dream. The door of the chamber opened softly under the delicate pressure of the hand of Aramis. The bishop approached the sleeper. A thick carpet deadened the sound of his steps, besides which Porthos snored in a manner to drown all noise. He laid one hand on his shoulder. "Rouse," said he. "Wake up, my dear Porthos." The voice of Aramis was soft and kind, but it conveyed more than a notice. It conveyed an order. His hand was light, but it indicated a danger. Porthos heard the voice and felt the hand of Aramis, even in the depth of his sleep. He started up. "Who goes there?" cried he, in his giant's voice. "Hush, hush, it is I," said Aramis. "You, my friend? And what the devil do you wake me for?" "To tell you that you must set off directly." Set off. Yes. Wherefore? For Paris. Porthos bounded up in his bed, and then sank back again, fixing his great eyes in agitation upon Aramis. For Paris. Yes. 100 leagues, said he. 104, replied the bishop. Oh, mon Dieu, sighed Porthos, lying down again, like children who contend with their born to gain an hour or two more sleep. 30 hours riding, said Aramis firmly. You know they're good relays. Porthos pushed out one leg, allowing a groan to escape him. Come, my friend, insisted the prelate with a sort of impatience. Porthos drew the other leg out of the bed. And is it absolutely necessary that I should go at once? Urgently necessary. Porthos got upon his feet and began to shake both walls and floors with his steps of a marble statue. Hush, hush, for the love of heaven, my dear Porthos, said Aramis, you will wake somebody. Ah, that's true, replied Porthos in a voice of thunder. I forgot that, but be satisfied, I am on guard. And so saying, he let fall a belt loaded with his sword and pistols, and a purse, from which the crowns escaped with a vibrating and prolonged noise. This noise made the blood of Aramis boil, whilst it drew from Porthos a formidable burst of laughter. How droll that is, said he, in the same voice. Not so loud, Porthos, not so loud. True, and he lowered his voice a half note. I was going to say, continued Porthos, that it is droll that we are never so slow as when we are in a hurry, and never make so much noise as when we wish to be silent. Yes, that is true, but let us give the proverb the lie. Porthos, let us make haste and hold our tongue. You see I am doing my best, said Porthos, putting on his haute de chausses. Very well. This is something in haste. It is more than that. It is serious. Porthos. Oh. D'Artagnan has questioned you, has he not? Questioned me? Yes, at Belle Isle. Not the least in the world. Are you sure of that, Porthos? Parbleu, it is impossible. Recollect yourself. He asked me what I was doing, and I told him studying topography. I would have made use of another word which you employed one day. Castrametation? Yes, that's it, but I never could recollect it. All the better. What more did he ask you? Who am Guettard was? Next, who am Jupenet was? He did not happen to see our plan of fortifications, did he? Yes. The devil he did. But don't be alarmed. I had rubbed out your writing with Indurubber. It was impossible for him to suppose you had given me any advice in those works. But our friend has phenomenally keen eyes. What are you afraid of? I fear that everything is discovered. Porthos. The matter is, then, to prevent a great misfortune. I have given orders to my people to close all the gates and doors. D'Artagnan will not be able to get out before daybreak. Your horse is ready saddled. You will gain the first relay. By 5 o'clock in the morning you will have traversed 15 leagues. Come. Aramis then assisted Porthos to dress, piece by piece, with as much celerity as the most skillful valet de chambre could have done. Porthos, half stupefied, let him do as he liked, and confounded himself in excuses. When he was ready, Aramis took him by the hand and led him, making him place his foot with precaution on every step of the stays, preventing him running against door frames, turning him this way and that, as if Aramis had been the giant and Porthos the dwarf. So set fire to an animated matter. A horse was waiting, ready saddled, in the courtyard. Porthos mounted. Then Aramis himself took the horse by the bridle and led him over some dung spread in the yard, with the evident intention of suppressing noise. He, at the same time, held tight the horse's nose to prevent him neighing. When arrived at the outward gate, drawing Porthos towards him, who was going off without even asking him what for. Now, friend Porthos, now, without drawing bridle, till you get to Paris, whispered he in his ears, eat on horseback, drink on horseback, sleep on horseback, but lose not a minute. That's enough. I will not stop. This letter to M. Fouquet, cost what it may, he must have it tomorrow before midday. He shall. And do not forget one thing, my friend. What is that? That you are riding out on a hunt for your brevet of duck and pea. Oh, said Porthos, with his eyes sparkling. I will do it in 24 hours, in that case. Try. Then let go the bridle, and forward Goliath. Aramis did let go, not the bridle, but the horse's nose. Porthos released his hand, clapped spurs to his horse, which set off at a gallop. As long as he could distinguish Porthos through the darkness, Aramis followed him with his eyes. When he was completely out of sight, he re-entered the yard. Nothing had stirred in D'Artagnan's apartment. The valet placed on watch at the door had neither seen any light nor heard any noise. Aramis closed his door carefully, sent the lackey to bed, and quickly sought his own. D'Artagnan really suspected nothing, therefore thought he had gained everything. When he awoke in the morning, about 4:30, he ran to the window in his shirt. The window looked out upon the court. Day was dawning. The court was deserted. The fowls, even, had not left their roosts. Not a servant appeared. Every door was closed. Good. All is still, said D'Artagnan to himself. Never mind. I am up first in the house. Let us dress. That will be so much done. And D'Artagnan dressed himself. But this time he endeavored not to give to the costume of M. Agnan the bourgeois and almost ecclesiastical rigidity he had affected before. He managed, by drawing his belt tighter, by buttoning his clothes in a different fashion, and by putting on his hat a little on one side, to restore to his person a little of that military character, the absence of which had surprised Aramis. This being done, he made free, or affected to make free with his host, and entered his chamber without ceremony. Aramis was asleep, or feigned to be so. A large book lay open upon his night desk. A waxlight was still burning in its silver sconce. This was more than enough to prove to D'Artagnan the quiescence of the prelate's night and the good intentions of his waking. The musketeer did to the bishop precisely as the bishop had done to Porthos. He tapped him on the shoulder. Evidently Aramis pretended to sleep, for, instead of waking suddenly, he who slept so lightly required a repetition of the summons. Ah, is that you? Said he, stretching his arms. What an agreeable surprise. Malavoy, sleep had made me forget I had the happiness to possess you. What o'clock is it? I do not know, said D'Artagnan, a little embarrassed. Early, I believe, but, you know, that devil of a habit of waking with the day sticks to me still. Do you wish that we should go out so soon? Asked Aramis. It appears to me to be very early. Just as you like. I thought we had agreed not to get on horseback before 8. Possibly, but I had so great a wish to see you that I said to myself, the sooner the better. And my 7 hours, sleep, said Aramis. Take care. I had reckoned upon them, and what I lose of them I must make up. But it seems to me that, formerly, you were less of a sleeper than that, dear friend. Your blood was alive, and you were never to be found in bed. And it is exactly on account of what you tell me that I am so fond of being there now. Then you confess that it is not for the sake of sleeping that you have put me off till 8 o'clock. I have been afraid you would laugh at me if I told you the truth. Tell me, notwithstanding. Well, from 6 to 8, I am accustomed to perform my devotions. Your devotions? Yes. I did not believe a bishop's exercises were so severe. A bishop, my friend, must sacrifice more to appearance than a simple cleric. More to you, Aramis, that is a word which reconciles me with your greatness. To appearances, that is a musketeer's word. In good truth, vivent les appearances, Aramis. Instead of felicitating me upon it, pardon me, D'Artagnan. It is a very mundane word which I had allowed to escape me. Must I leave you, then? I want time to collect my thoughts, my friend, and for my usual prayers. Well, I leave you to them, but on account of that poor pagan, D'Artagnan, abridge them for once. I beg, I thirst for speech with you. Well, D'Artagnan, I promise you that within an hour and a half of devotions. Hey, my friend, be as reasonable with me as you can. Let me have the best bargain possible. Aramis began to laugh. Still agreeable, still young, still gay, said he, you have come into my diocese to set me quarreling with Grace. Bah! And you know well that I was never able to resist your seductions. You will cost me my salvation, D'Artagnan. D'Artagnan bit his lips. Well, said he, I will take the sin on my own head. Favor me with one simple Christian sign of the cross. Favor me with one pater, and we will part. Hush, said Aramis. We are already no longer alone. I hear strangers coming up. Well, dismiss them. Impossible. I made an appointment with them yesterday. It is a principal of the College of the Jesuits and the superior of the Dominicans. Your staff? Well, so be it. What are you going to do? I will go and wake Porthos, and remain in his company till you have finished the conference. Aramis did not stir. His brow remained unbent. He betrayed himself by no gesture or word. Go, said he, as D'Artagnan advanced to the door. Apropos, do you know where Porthos sleeps? No, but I will inquire. Take the corridor, and open the second door on the left. Thank you. Au revoir. And D'Artagnan departed in the direction pointed out by Aramis. 10 minutes had not passed away when he came back. He found Aramis seated between the superior of the Dominicans and the principal of the College of the Jesuits, exactly in the same situation as he had found him formerly in the auberge at Crèvecoeur. This company did not at all terrify the Musketeer. What is it? Said Aramis, quietly. You have apparently something to say to me, my friend. It is, replied D'Artagnan, fixing his eyes upon Aramis. It is that Porthos is not in his apartment. Indeed, said Aramis, calmly. Are you sure? Pardieu, I came from his chamber. Where can he be, then? That is what I am asking you. And have not you inquired? Yes, I have. And what answer did you get? That Porthos, often walking out in the morning, without saying anything, had probably gone out. What did you do, then? I went to the stables, replied D'Artagnan carelessly. What to do? To see if Porthos had departed on horseback. And interrogated the bishop. Well, there's a horse missing. Stall number 3, Goliath. All this dialogue, it may be easily understood, was not exempt from a certain affectation on the part of the Musketeer and a perfect complaisance on the part of Aramis. Oh, I guess how it is, said Aramis, after having considered for a moment. Porthos has gone out to give us a surprise. A surprise? Yes. The canal which goes from Vannes to the sea abounds in teal and snipes. That is Porthos's favorite sport, and he will bring us back a dozen for breakfast. Do you think so? Said D'Artagnan. I am sure of it. Where else can he be? I would lay a wager he took a gun with him. Well, that is possible, said D'Artagnan. Do one thing, my friend. Get on horseback and join him. You are right, said D'Artagnan. I will. Shall I go with you? No, thank you. Porthos is a rather remarkable man. I will inquire as I go along. Will you take an arquebuse? Thank you. Order what horse you like to be saddled. The one I rode yesterday, on coming from Belle Isle. So be it. Use a horse as your own. Aramis rang, and gave orders to have the horse D'Artagnan had chosen saddled. D'Artagnan followed the servant charged with the execution of this order. When arrived at the door, the servant drew on one side to allow D'Artagnan to pass, and at that moment he caught the eye of his master. A knitting of the brow gave the intelligent spy to understand that all should be given to D'Artagnan he wished. D'Artagnan got into the saddle, and Aramis heard the steps of his horse on the pavement. An instant after, the servant returned. Well, asked the bishop. Monseigneur, he has followed the course of the canal, and is going towards the sea," said the servant. "Very well," said Aramis. In fact, D'Artagnan, dismissing all suspicion, hastened towards the ocean, constantly hoping to see in the lands, or on the beach, the colossal profile of Porthos. He persisted in fancying he could trace a horse's steps in every puddle. Sometimes he imagined he heard the report of a gun. This illusion lasted 3 hours, during 2 of which he went forward in search of his friend. In the last he returned to the house. "We must have crossed," said he, "and I shall find them waiting for me at table." D'Artagnan was mistaken. He no more found Porthos at the palace than he had found him on the seashore. Aramis was waiting for him at the top of the stairs, looking very much concerned. "Did my people not find you, my dear D'Artagnan?" cried he, as soon as he caught sight of the musketeer. "No. Did you send anyone after me?" "I am deeply concerned, my friend, deeply, to have induced you to make such a useless search. But about 7 o'clock, the almoner of St. Patern came here. He had met Du Vallon, who was going away, and who, being unwilling to disturb anybody at the palace, had charged him to tell me that, fearing an Guittard would play him some turn in his absence, he was going to take advantage of the morning tide to make a tour to Belle Isle. But tell me, Goliath has not crossed the 4 leagues of sea, I should think." "They are full 6, said Aramis. "That makes it less probable still." "Therefore, my friend," said Aramis, with one of his blandest smiles, "Goliath is in the stable. Well pleased, I will answer for it that Porthos is no longer on his back." In fact, the horse had been brought back from the relay by the direction of the prelate, from whom no detail escaped. D'Artagnan appeared as well satisfied as possible with the explanation. He entered upon a part of dissimulation which agreed perfectly with the suspicions that arose more and more strongly in his mind. He breakfasted between the Jesuit and Aramis, having the Dominican in front of him, and smiling particularly at the Dominican, whose jolly, fat face pleased him much. The repast was long and sumptuous. Excellent Spanish wine, fine Morbihan oysters, exquisite fish from the mouth of the Loire, enormous prawns from Paimboeuf, and delicious game from the Meuse constituted the principal part of it. D'Artagnan ate much, and drank but little. Aramis drank nothing, unless it was water. After the repast, "You offered me an arquebuse," said D'Artagnan. "I did." "Lend it me, then." "Are you going shooting?" "Whilst waiting for Porthos. It is the best thing I can do, I think." "Take what you like from the trophy. Will you not come with me?" "I would with great pleasure, but, alas, my friend, sporting is forbidden to bishops." "Aye," said D'Artagnan, "I did not know that." "Besides," continued Aramis, "I shall be busy till midday." "I shall go alone, then," said D'Artagnan. "I am sorry to say you must, but come back to dinner." "Pardieu, the eating at your house is too good to make me think of not coming back." And thereupon D'Artagnan quitted his host, bowed to the guests, and took his arquebuse, but instead of shooting, went straight to the little port of Vannes. He looked in vain to observe if anybody saw him. He could discern neither thing nor person. He engaged a little fishing boat for 25 livres, and set off at 11:30, convinced that he had not been followed. And that was true. He had not been followed. Only a Jesuit brother, placed in the top of the steeple of his church, had not, since the morning, by the help of an excellent glass, lost sight of one of his steps. At 11:15, Aramis was informed that D'Artagnan was sailing towards Belle Isle. The voyage was rapid. A good north-northeast wind drove him towards the isle. As he approached, his eyes were constantly fixed upon the coast. He looked to see if, upon the shore or upon the fortifications, the brilliant dress and vast stature of Porthos should stand out against a slightly clouded sky. But his search was vain. He landed without having seen anything, and learned from the first soldier interrogated by him that M. du Vallon had not yet returned from Vannes. Then, without losing an instant, D'Artagnan ordered his little bark to put its head towards Sarzeau. We know that the wind changes with the different hours of the day. The breeze had veered from the north-northeast to the southeast. The wind, then, was almost as good for the return to Sarzeau as it had been for the voyage to Belle Isle. In 3 hours D'Artagnan had touched the continent. 2 hours more sufficed for his ride to Vannes. In spite of the rapidity of his passage, what D'Artagnan endured of impatience and anger during that short passage, the deck alone of the vessel, upon which he stamped backwards and forward for 3 hours, could testify. He made but one bound from the quay whereon he landed to the episcopal palace. He thought to terrify Aramis by the promptitude of his return. He wished to reproach him with his duplicity, and yet with reserve, but with sufficient spirit, nevertheless, to make him feel all the consequences of it, and force from him a part of his secret, he hoped. In short, thanks to that heat of expression, which is the secret's what the charge with the bayonet is to redoubts, to bring the mysterious Aramis to some manifestation or other. But he found, in the vestibule of the palace, the valet de chambre, who closed the passage, while smiling upon him with a stupid A. "Monseigneur," cried D'Artagnan, endeavoring to put him aside with his hand. Moved for an instant, the valet resumed his station. "Monseigneur," said he. "Yes, to be sure. Do you not know me, imbecile?" "Yes, you are the Chevalier D'Artagnan." "Then let me pass." "It is of no use." "Why of no use?" "Because his greatness is not at home." "What? His greatness is not at home? Where is he then?" "Gone." "Gone?" "Yes." "Whither?" "I don't know, but perhaps he tells Monsieur le Chevalier." "And how? Where? In what fashion?" "In this letter, which he gave me for Monsieur le Chevalier." And the valet de chambre drew a letter from his pocket. "Give it me, then, you rascal," said D'Artagnan, snatching it from his hand. "Oh, yes," continued he, at the first line. "Yes, I understand." And he read, "Dear friend, an affair of the most urgent nature calls me to a distant parish of my diocese. I hope to see you again before I set out, but I lose at hope in thinking that you are going, no doubt, to remain 2 or 3 days at Belle Isle with our dear Porthos. Amuse yourself as well as you can, but do not attempt to hold out against him at table. This is a counsel I might have given even to Athos in his most brilliant and best days. Adieu, dear friend. Believe I regret greatly not having better, and for a longer time, profited by your excellent company." "Mordieu," cried D'Artagnan, "I am tricked. Ah, blockhead, brute, triple fool that I am. But those laugh best who laugh last. Oh, duped like a monkey, cheated with an empty nutshell." And with a hearty blow bestowed upon the nose of the smirking valet de chambre, he made all haste out of the episcopal palace. Furet, however good a trotter, was not equal to present circumstances. D'Artagnan therefore took the post, and chose a horse which he soon caused to demonstrate, with good spurs and a light hand, that deer are not the swiftest animals in nature. Chapter 74, in which D'Artagnan makes all speed, Porthos snores, and Aramis counsels. From 30 to 35 hours after the events we have just related, as M. Fouquet, according to his custom, having interdicted his door, was working in the cabinet of his house at St. Mandé, with which we are already acquainted, a carriage, drawn by 4 horses steaming with sweat, entered the court at full gallop. This carriage was, probably, expected, for 3 or 4 lackeys hastened to the door, which they opened. Whilst M. Fouquet rose from his bureau and ran to the window, a man got painfully out of the carriage, descending with difficulty the 3 steps of the door, leaning upon the shoulders of the lackeys. He had scarcely uttered his name, when the valet upon whom he was not leaning sprang up the perron, and disappeared in the vestibule. This man went to inform his master, but he had no occasion to knock at the door. Fouquet was standing on the threshold. "Monseigneur, the Bishop of Vannes," said he. "Very well," replied his master. Then, leaning over the banister of the staircase, of which Aramis was beginning to ascend the first steps, "Ah, dear friend," said he, "you so soon." "Yes, I, myself, monsieur, but bruised, battered, as you see." "Oh, my poor friend," said Fouquet, presenting him his arm, on which Aramis leant, whilst the servants drew back respectfully. "Bow!" replied Aramis. "It is nothing. Since I am here, the principal thing was I should get here, and here I am. Speak quickly, said Fouquet, closing the door of the cabinet behind Aramis and himself. Are we alone? Yes, perfectly. No one observes us. No one can hear us. Be satisfied? Nobody. Is M. du Vallon arrived? Yes. And you have received my letter? Yes. The affair is serious, apparently, since it necessitates your attendance in Paris at a moment when your presence was so urgent elsewhere. You are right. It could not be more serious. Thank you. Thank you. What is it about? But, for God's sake, before anything else, take time to breathe, dear friend. You are so pale, you frighten me. I am really in great pain. But, for heaven's sake, think nothing about me. Did M. du Vallon tell you nothing when he delivered the letter to you? No. I heard a great noise. I went to the window. I saw at the foot of the perron a sort of horseman of marble. I went down. He held the letter out to me, and his horse fell down dead. But he fell with the horse. He was lifted and carried to an apartment. Having read the letter, I went up to him in hopes of obtaining more ample information, but he was asleep and, after such a fashion, that it was impossible to wake him. I took pity on him. I gave orders that his boots should be cut from off his legs, and that he should be left quite undisturbed. So far, well. Now, this is a question in hand. Monseigneur, you have seen M. d'Artagnan in Paris, have you not? Certes, and think him a man of intelligence, and even a man of heart, although he did bring about the death of our dear friends, Liadet and Damaris. Alas, yes, I heard of that. At Tours I met the courier who was bringing me the letter from Gourville, and the dispatches from Pelisson. Have you seriously reflected on that event, monsieur? Yes. And in it you perceive a direct attack upon your sovereignty. And do you believe it to be so? Oh, yes, I think so. Well, I must confess that sad idea occurred to me likewise. Do not blind yourself, monsieur, in the name of heaven. Listen attentively to me. I return to D'Artagnan. I am all attention. Under what circumstances did you see him? He came here for money. With what kind of order? With an order from the king. Direct? Signed by his majesty. Then, well, D'Artagnan has been to Belle Isle. He was disguised. He came in the character of some sort of an attendant, charged by his master to purchase oak mines. Now, D'Artagnan has no other master but the king. He came, then, sent by the king. He saw Porthos. Who is Porthos? I beg your pardon. I made a mistake. He saw M. du Vallon at Belle Isle, and he knows, as well as you and I do, that Belle Isle is fortified. And you think that the king sent him there, said Fouquet, pensively. I certainly do. And D'Artagnan, in the hands of the king, is a dangerous instrument, the most dangerous imaginable. Then I formed a correct opinion of him at the first glance. How so? I wish to attach him to myself. If you judge him to be the bravest, the most acute, and the most adroit man in France, you judge correctly. He must be had, then, at any price. D'Artagnan, is not that your opinion? It may be my opinion, but you will never get him. Why? Because we have allowed the time to go by. He was dissatisfied with the court. We should have profited by that. Since that, he has passed into England. They powerfully assisted in the Restoration. They gained a fortune. And, after all, he returned to the service of the king. Well, if he has returned to the service of the king, it is because he is well paid in that service. We will pay him even better, that is all. Oh, monsieur, excuse me. D'Artagnan has a high respect for his word, and where that is once engaged he keeps it. What do you conclude, then? Said Fouquet, with great inquietude. At present, the principal thing is to parry a dangerous blow. And how is it to be parried? Listen. But D'Artagnan will come and render an account to the king of his mission. Oh, we have time enough to think about that. How so? You are much in advance of him, I presume? Nearly 10 hours. Well, in 10 hours. Aramis shook his pale head. Look at these clouds which flit across the heavens, at these swallows which cut the air. D'Artagnan moves more quickly than the clouds or the birds. D'Artagnan is the wind which carries them. A strange man. I tell you, he is superhuman, monsieur. He is of my own age, and I have known him these 35 years. Well, listen to my calculation, monsieur. I sent M. du Vallon off to you 2 hours after midnight. M. du Vallon was 8 hours in advance of me. When did M. du Vallon arrive? About 4 hours ago. You see, then, that I gained 4 upon him, and yet Porthos is a staunch horseman, and he has left on the road 8 dead horses, whose bodies I came to successively. I rode post 50 leagues, but I have the gout, the gravel, and what else I know not, so that fatigue kills me. I was obliged to dismount at Toys. Since that, rolling along in a carriage, half dead, sometimes overturned, drawn upon the sides, and sometimes on the back of the carriage, always with 4 spirited horses at full gallop, I have arrived, gaining 4 hours upon Porthos. But, see you, D'Artagnan does not weigh 300 weight, as Porthos does. D'Artagnan has not the gout and gravel, as I have. He is not a horseman. He is a centaur. D'Artagnan, look you, set out for Belle Isle when I set out for Paris. And D'Artagnan, notwithstanding my 10 hours, advance, D'Artagnan will arrive within 2 hours after me. But, then, accidents. He never meets with accidents. Horses may fail him. He will run as fast as a horse. Good God, what a man! Yes, he is a man whom I love and admire. I love him because he is good, great, and loyal. I admire him because he represents in my eyes the culminating point of human power. But, whilst loving and admiring him, I fear him, and am on my guard against him. Now then, I resume, monsieur. In 2 hours D'Artagnan will be here. Be beforehand with him. Go to the Louvre, and see the king before he sees D'Artagnan. What shall I say to the king? Nothing. Give him Belle Isle. Oh, Monsieur d'Herblay, cried Fouquet, what projects crushed all at once? After one project that has failed, there is always another project that may lead to fortune. We should never despair. Go, monsieur, and go at once. But that garrison, so carefully chosen, the king will change it directly. That garrison, monsieur, was the king's when it entered Belle Isle. It is yours now. It is the same with all garrisons after a fortnight's occupation. Let things go on, monsieur. Do you see any inconvenience in having an army at the end of a year, instead of 2 regiments? Do you not see that your garrison of today will make you partisans at La Rochelle, Nantes, Bordeaux, Toulouse? In short, wherever they may be sent to, go to the king, monsieur. Go. Time flies, and D'Artagnan, while we are losing time, is flying, like an arrow, along the high road. Monsieur d'Herblay, you know that each word from you is a germ which fructifies in my thoughts. I will go to the Louvre. Instantly, will you not? I only ask time to change my dress. Remember that D'Artagnan has no need to pass through Saint Mandé, but will go straight to the Louvre. That is cutting off an hour from the advantage that yet remains to us. D'Artagnan may have everything except my English horses. I shall be at the Louvre in 25 minutes. And, without losing a second, Fouquet gave orders for his departure. Aramis had only time to say to him, "Return as quickly as you go, for I shall await you impatiently." 5 minutes after, the superintendent was flying along the road to Paris. During this time Aramis desired to be shown the chamber in which Porthos was sleeping. At the door of Fouquet's cabinet he was folded in the arms of Pelisson, who had just heard of his arrival and had left his office to see him. Aramis received, with that friendly dignity which he knew so well how to assume, these caresses, respectful as earnest, but all at once stopping on the landing place. "What is that I hear up yonder?" There was, in fact, a hoarse, growling kind of noise, like the roar of a hungry tiger or an impatient lion. "Oh, that is nothing," said Pelisson, smiling. "Well, but it is M. du Vallon snoring." "Ah, true," said Aramis. "I had forgotten. No one but he is capable of making such a noise. Allow me, Pelisson, to inquire if he wants anything. And you will permit me to accompany you?" "Oh, certainly," and both entered the chamber. Porthos was stretched upon the bed. His face was violet rather than red. His eyes were swelled. His mouth was wide open. The roaring which escaped from the deep cavities of his chest made the glass of the windows vibrate. To those developed and clearly defined muscles starting from his face, to his ematted with sweat, to the energetic heaving of his chin and shoulders, it was impossible to refuse a certain degree of admiration. Strength carried to this point is semi-divine. The Herculean legs and feet of Porthos had, by swelling, burst his stockings. All the strength of his huge body was converted into the rigidity of stone. Porthos moved no more than does a giant of granite which reclines upon the plains of Agrigentum. According to Pelisson's orders, his boots had been cut off, for no human power could have pulled them off. For lackeys had tried in vain, pulling at them as they would have pulled capstans, and yet all this did not awaken him. They had hacked off his boots in fragments, and his legs had fallen back upon the bed. They then cut off the rest of his clothes, carried him to a bath, in which they let him soak a considerable time. They then put on him clean linen, and placed him in a well-warmed bed, the whole with efforts and pains which might have roused a dead man, but which did not make Porthos open an eye, or interrupt for a second the formidable diapason of his snoring. Aramis wished on his part, with his nervous nature, armed with extraordinary courage, to outbrave fatigue, and employ himself with Gourville and Pelisson, but he fainted in the chair in which he had persisted sitting. He was carried into the adjoining room, where the repose of bed soon soothed his failing brain. Chapter 75, in which Monsieur Fouquet acts. In the meantime, Fouquet was hastening to the Louvre, at the best speed of his English horses. The king was at work with Colbert. All at once the king became thoughtful. The 2 sentences of death he had signed on mounting his throne sometimes recurred to his memory. There were 2 black spots which he saw with his eyes open, 2 spots of blood which he saw when his eyes were closed. "Monsieur," said he, rather sharply, to the intendant, "it sometimes seems to me that those 2 men you made me condemn were not very great culprits." "Sire, they were picked out from the herd of the farmers of the financiers, which wanted decimating." "Picked out by whom?" "By necessity, sire," replied Colbert, coldly. "Necessity, a great word," murmured the young king. "A great goddess, sire." "They were devoted friends of the superintendent, were they not?" "Yes, sire, friends who would have given up their lives to Monsieur Fouquet." "They have given them, monsieur," said the king. "That is true, but uselessly, by good luck, which was not their intention." "How much money had these men fraudulently obtained?" 10 millions, perhaps, of which 6 have been confiscated." "And is that money in my coffers?" said the king with a certain air of repugnance. "It is there, sire, but this confiscation, whilst threatening M. Fouquet, has not touched him." "You conclude, then, M. Colbert, that if M. Fouquet has raised against your majesty a troop of factious riders to extricate his friends from punishment, he will raise an army when he is in turn to extricate himself from punishment." The king darted at his confidant one of those looks which resemble the livid fire of a flash of lightning, one of those looks which illuminate the darkness of the basest consciences. "I am astonished," said he, "that, thinking such things of M. Fouquet, you did not come to give me your counsels thereupon." "Counsels upon what, sire?" "Tell me, in the first place, clearly and precisely, what you think, M. Colbert." "Upon what subject, sire?" "Upon the conduct of M. Fouquet." "I think, sire, that M. Fouquet, not satisfied with attracting all the money to himself, as M. Mazarin did, and by that means depriving your majesty of one part of your power, still wishes to attract to himself all the friends of easy life and pleasure, of what idlers call poetry, and politicians, corruption. I think that by holding the subject of your majesty in pay, he trespasses upon the royal prerogative and cannot, if this continues so, be long in placing your majesty among the weak and the obscure. How would you qualify all these projects, M. Colbert? The projects of M. Fouquet, sire, yes, they are cold crimes of lèse majesté. And what is done to criminals guilty of lèse majesté? They are arrested, tried, and punished. You are quite sure that M. Fouquet has conceived the idea of the crime you impute to him. I can say more, sire, there is even a commencement of the execution of it. Well, then, I return to that which I was saying, M. Colbert. And you were saying, sire, give me counsel. Pardon me, sire, but in the first place, I have something to add. Say, what? An evident, palpable, material proof of treason. And what is that? I have just learnt that M. Fouquet is fortifying Belle Isle. Ah, indeed. Yes, sire. Are you sure? Perfectly. Do you know, sire, what soldiers there are in Belle Isle? No, my foi. Do you? I am ignorant, likewise. Sire, I should therefore propose to your majesty to send somebody to Belle Isle. Who? Me, for instance. And what would you do at Belle Isle? Inform myself whether, after the example of the ancient feudal lords, M. Fouquet was battlementing his walls. And with what purpose could he do that? With the purpose of defending himself some day against his king. But if it be thus, M. Colbert, said Louis, we must immediately do as you say. M. Fouquet must be arrested. That is impossible. I thought I had already told you, monsieur, that I suppressed that word in my service. The service of your majesty cannot prevent M. Fouquet from being surintendant general. Well, that, in consequence of holding that post, he has for him all the parliament, as he has all the army by his largesses, literature by his favors, and the noblesse by his presence. That is to say, then, that I can do nothing against M. Fouquet. Absolutely nothing, at least at present, sire. You are a sterile counselor, M. Colbert. Oh, no, sire, for I will not confine myself to pointing out the peril to your majesty. Come, then, where shall we begin to undermine this colossus? Let us see. And his majesty began to laugh bitterly. He has grown great by money. Kill him by money, sire. If I were to deprive him of his charge. A bad means, sire. The good, then ruin him. Sire, that is the way. But how? Occasions will not be wanting. Take advantage of all occasions. Point them out to me. Here is one at once. His Royal Highness Monsieur is about to be married. His nuptials must be magnificent. That is a good occasion for your majesty to demand 1,000,000 of M. Fouquet. M. Fouquet, who pays 20,000 livres down when he need not pay more than 5,000, will easily find that million when your majesty demands it. That is all very well. I will demand it, said Louis. If your majesty will sign the ordinance, I will have the money got together myself. And Colbert pushed a paper before the king, and presented a pen to him. At that moment the usher opened the door and announced Monsieur le Surintendant. Louis turned pale. Colbert let the pen fall, and drew back from the king, over whom he extended his black wings like an evil spirit. The superintendent made his entrance like a man of the court, to whom a single glance was sufficient to make him appreciate the situation. That situation was not very encouraging for Fouquet, whatever might be his consciousness of strength. The small black eye of Colbert, dilated by envy, and the limpid eye of Louis XIV, inflamed by anger, signaled some pressing danger. Courtiers err, with regard to court rumors, like old soldiers, who distinguish through the blast of wind and bluster of leaves the sound of the distant steps of an armed troop. They can, after having listened, tell pretty nearly how many men are marching, how many arms resound, How many cannons roll? Fouquet had then only to interrogate the silence which his arrival had produced. He found it big with menacing revelations. The king allowed him time enough to advance as far as the middle of the chamber. His adolescent modesty commanded this forbearance of the moment. Fouquet boldly seized the opportunity. "Sire," said he, "I was impatient to see your majesty." "What for?" asked Louis. "To announce some good news to you." Colbert, minus grandeur of person, less largeness of heart, resembled Fouquet in many points. He had the same penetration, the same knowledge of men. Moreover, that great power of self-impression which gives to hypocrites time to reflect and gather themselves up to take a spring. He guessed that Fouquet was going to meet the blow he was about to deal him. His eyes glittered ominously. "What news?" asked the king. Fouquet placed a roll of papers on the table. "Let your majesty have the goodness to cast your eyes over this work," said he. The king slowly unfolded the paper. "Plans?" said he. "Yes, sire." "And what are these plans?" "A new fortification, sire." "Ah, ah," said the king. "You amuse yourself with tactics and strategies. Then, M. Fouquet?" "I occupy myself with everything that may be useful to the reign of your majesty," replied Fouquet. "Beautiful descriptions," said the king, looking at the design. "Your majesty comprehends, without doubt," said Fouquet, bending over the paper. "Here is the circle of the walls. Here are the forts. They're the advance works. And what do I see here, monsieur?" "The sea." "The sea all round?" "Yes, sire." "And what is, then, the name of this place of which you show me the plan?" "Sire, it is Bellarmé," replied Fouquet with simplicity. At this word, at this name, Colbert made so marked a movement that the king turned round to enforce the necessity for reserve. Fouquet did not appear to be the least in the world concerned by the movement of Colbert or the king's signal. "Monsieur," continued Louis, "you have then fortified Belle Isle?" "Yes, sire, and I have brought the plan and the accounts to your majesty," replied Fouquet. "I have expended 1,600,000 livres in this operation." "What to do?" replied Louis, coldly, having taken the initiative from a malicious look of the intendant. "For an aim very easy to seize," replied Fouquet. "Your majesty was on cool terms with Great Britain." "Yes, but since the restoration of King Charles II, I have formed an alliance with him." "A month since, sire, your majesty has truly said, but it is more than 6 months since the fortifications of Belle Isle were begun." "Then they have become useless." "Sire, fortifications are never useless. I fortified Belle Isle against M. Monk and Lambert, and all those London citizens who were playing at soldiers. Belle Isle will be ready fortified against the Dutch, against whom either England or your majesty cannot fail to make war." The king was again silent, and looked askant at Colbert. "Belle Isle, I believe," added Louis, "is yours, M. Fouquet?" "No, sire." "Whose then?" "Your majesty's." Colbert was seized with as much terror as if a gulf had opened beneath his feet. Louis started with admiration, either the genius or the devotion of Fouquet. "Explain yourself, monsieur," said he. "Nothing more easy, sire. Belle Isle is one of my estates. I have fortified it at my own expense. But as nothing in the world can oppose a subject making an humble present to his king, I offer your majesty the proprietorship of the estate, of which you will leave me the usufruct. Belle Isle, as a place of war, ought to be occupied by the king. Your majesty will be able, henceforth, to keep a safe garrison there." Colbert felt almost sinking down upon the floor. To keep himself from falling, he was obliged to hold by the columns of the wainscoting. "This is a piece of great skill in the art of war that you have exhibited here, monsieur," said Louis. "Sire, the initiative did not come from me," replied Fouquet. "Many others have inspired me with it. The plans themselves have been made by one of the most distinguished engineers. His name, M. du Vallon." "M. du Vallon," resumed Louis. "I do not know him. It is much to be lamented, M. Colbert," continued he, that I do not know the names of the men of talent who do honor to my reign. And while saying these words, he turned towards Colbert. The latter felt himself crushed. The sweat flowed from his brow. No word presented itself to his lips. He suffered an inexpressible martyrdom. You will recollect that name, added Louis XIV. Colbert bowed, but was paler than his ruffles of Flemish lace. Fouquet continued. The masonries are of Roman concrete. The architect amalgamated it for me after the best accounts of antiquity. And the cannon? Asked Louis. Oh, sire, that concerns your majesty. It did not become me to place cannon in my own house, unless your majesty had told me it was yours. Louis began to float, undetermined between the hatred which the so powerful man inspired him with, and the pity he felt for the other, so cast down, who seemed to him the counterfeit of a former. But the consciousness of his kingly duty prevailed over the feelings of the man, and he stretched out his finger to the paper. It must have cost you a great deal of money to carry these plans into execution, said he. I believe I had the honor of telling your majesty the amount. Repeat it if you please. I have forgotten it. 1,600,000 livres. 1,600,000 livres. You are enormously rich, monsieur. It is your majesty who is rich, since Belle Isle is yours. Yes, thank you, but however rich I may be, M. Fouquet. The king stopped. Well, sire, asked the superintendent, I foresee the moment when I shall want money. You, sire? And at what moment? Then, tomorrow, for example. Will your majesty do me the honor to explain yourself? My brother is going to marry the English princess. Well, sire, I ought to give the bride a reception worthy of the granddaughter of Henry IV. That is but just, sire. Then I shall want money. No doubt. I shall want. Louis hesitated. The sum he was going to demand was the same that he had been obliged to refuse Charles II. He turned towards Colbert, that he might give the blow. I shall want, tomorrow, repeated he, looking at Colbert. 1,000,000, said the latter, bluntly, delighted to take his revenge. Fouquet turned his back upon the intendant to listen to the king. He did not turn round, but waited till the king repeated, or rather murmured, 1,000,000. Oh, sire, replied Fouquet disdainfully, 1,000,000. What will your majesty do with 1,000,000? It appears to me, nevertheless, said Louis XIV, that is not more than is spent at the nuptials of one of the most petty princes of Germany. Monsieur, your majesty must have 2 millions at least. The horses alone would run away with 500,000 livres. I shall have the honor of sending your majesty 1,600,000 livres this evening. How? Said the king. 1,600,000 livres. Look, sire, replied Fouquet, without even turning towards Colbert. I know that once 400,000 livres of the 2 millions, but this monsieur of intendants, pointing over his shoulder to Colbert, who, if possible, became paler, behind him, has in his coffers 900,000 livres of mine. The king turned round to look at Colbert. But, said the latter, Monsieur, continued Fouquet, still speaking indirectly to Colbert, Monsieur has received a week ago 1,600,000 livres. He has paid 100,000 livres to the guards, 64,000 livres to the hospitals, 25,000 to the Swiss, 130,000 for provisions, 1,000 for arms, 10,000 for accidental expenses. I do not err, then, in reckoning upon 900,000 livres that are left. Then turning towards Colbert, like a disdainful head of office towards his inferior, take care, monsieur, said he, that those 900,000 livres be remitted to his majesty this evening, in gold. But, said the king, that will make 2,500,000 livres. Sire, the 500,000 livres over will serve as pocket money for his royal highness. You understand, Monsieur Colbert, this evening before 8 o'clock. And with these words, bowing respectfully to the king, the superintendent made his exit backwards, without honoring with a single look the envious man, whose head he had just half shaved. Colbert tore his ruffles to pieces in his rage, and bit his lips till they bled. Fouquet had not passed the door of the cabinet, when an usher pushing by him exclaimed, "A courier from Bretagne for his Majesty." M. d'Herblay was right, murmured Fouquet, pulling out his watch. An hour and 55 minutes. It was quite true. Chapter 76, in which D'Artagnan finishes by at length placing his hand upon his captain's commission. The reader guesses beforehand whom the usher preceded in announcing the courier from Bretagne. This messenger was easily recognized. It was D'Artagnan, his clothes dusty, his face inflamed, his head dripping with sweat, his legs stiff. He lifted his feet painfully at every step, on which resounded the clink of his blood-stained spurs. He perceived in the doorway he was passing through the superintendent coming out. Fouquet bowed with a smile to him who, an hour before, was bringing him ruin and death. D'Artagnan found in his goodness of heart and in his inexhaustible vigor of body enough presence of mind to remember the kind reception of this man. He bowed then, also, much more from benevolence and compassion than from respect. He felt upon his lips the word which had so many times been repeated to the Duc de Guise, "Fly." But to pronounce that word would have been to betray his cause. To speak that word in the cabinet of the king, and before an usher, would have been to ruin himself gratuitously, and could save nobody. D'Artagnan then contented himself with bowing to Fouquet and entered. At this moment the king floated between the joy of the last words of Fouquet had given him, and his pleasure at the return of D'Artagnan. Without being a courtier, D'Artagnan had a glance as sure and as rapid as if he had been one. He read, on his entrance, devouring humiliation on the countenance of Colbert. He even heard the king say these words to him: "Ah, Monsieur Colbert, you have then 900,000 livres at the intendant's." Colbert, suffocated, bowed, but made no reply. All this scene entered into the mind of D'Artagnan by the eyes and ears at once. The first word of Louis to his musketeer, as if he wished it to contrast with what he was saying at the moment, was a kind good day. His second was to send away Colbert. The letter left the king's cabinet, pallid and tottering, whilst D'Artagnan twisted up the ends of his mustache. "I love to see one of my servants in this disorder," said the king, admiring the martial stains upon the clothes of his envoy. "I thought, sire, my presence at the Louvre was sufficiently urgent to excuse my presenting myself thus before you. You bring me great news. Then, monsieur?" "Sire, the thing is this, in 2 words, Belle Isle is fortified, admirably fortified. Belle Isle has a double inside, a citadel, 2 detached forts. Its ports contain 3 corsairs, and the side batteries only await their cannon." "I know all that, monsieur," replied the king. "What? Your Majesty knows all that," replied the musketeer, stupefied. "I have the plan of the fortifications of Belle Isle," said the king. "Your Majesty has a plan." "Here it is." "It is really correct?" "Sire, I saw a similar one on the spot." D'Artagnan's brow became clouded. "Ah, I understand all. Your Majesty did not trust me alone, but sent some other person," said he in a reproachful tone. "Of what importance is the manner, monsieur, in which I have learned what I know, so that I know it?" "Sire, sire," said the musketeer, without seeking even to conceal his dissatisfaction, "but I must be permitted to say to your Majesty that it is not worthwhile to make me use such speed, to risk 20 times the breaking of my neck, to salute me on my arrival with such intelligence. Sire, when people are not trusted, or are deemed insufficient, they should scarcely be employed." And D'Artagnan, with a movement perfectly military, stamped with his foot, and left upon the floor dust stained with blood. The king looked at him, inwardly enjoying his first triumph. "Monsieur," said he, at the expiration of a minute, "not only is Belle Isle known to me, but, still further, Belle Isle is mine." "That is well, that is well. Sire, I ask but one thing more," replied D'Artagnan. "My discharge." "What? Your discharge?" "Without doubt I am too proud to eat the bread of the king without earning it, or rather by gaining it badly. My discharge, sire." "Oh, oh." I ask for my discharge, or I will take it. You are angry, monsieur. I have reason. More to you. 32 hours in the saddle. I ride night and day. I perform prodigies of speed. I arrive stiff as the corpse of a man who has been hung, and another arrives before me. Come, sire, I am a fool. My discharge, sire. Monsieur d'Artagnan, said Louis, leaning his white hand upon the dusty arm of the musketeer, what I tell you will not at all affect that which I promised you. A king's word given must be kept. And the king, going straight to his table, opened a drawer and took out a folded paper. Here is your commission of captain of musketeers. You have won it, Monsieur d'Artagnan. D'Artagnan opened the paper eagerly and scanned it twice. He could scarcely believe his eyes. And this commission is given you, continued the king, not only on account of your journey to Belle Isle, but, moreover, for your brave intervention at the Place de Grève. There, likewise, you served me valiantly. Ah, said D'Artagnan, without his self-command being able to prevent a blush from mounting to his eyes. You know that also, sire? Yes, I know it. The king possessed a piercing glance and an infallible judgment, when it was his object to read men's minds. You have something to say, said he to the musketeer, something to say which you do not say. Come, speak freely, monsieur. You know that I told you, once for all, that you are to be always quite frank with me. Well, sire, what I have to say is this, that I would prefer being made captain of musketeers for having charge of battery at the head of my company, or taken a city, than for causing two wretches to be hung. Is this quite true, you tell me? And why should your majesty suspect me of dissimulation, I ask? Because I know you well, monsieur. You cannot repent of having drawn your sword for me. Well, in that your majesty is deceived, and greatly. Yes, I do repent of having drawn my sword on account of the results that action produced. The poor men who were hung, sire, were neither your enemies nor mine, and they could not defend themselves. The king preserved silence for a moment, and your companion, M. d'Artagnan, does he partake of your repentance? My companion? Yes, you were not alone, I have been told. Alone? Where? At the Place de Grève. No, sire, no, said D'Artagnan, blushing at the idea that the king might have a suspicion that he, D'Artagnan, had wished to engross to himself all the glory that belonged to Raoul. No, more do you, and as your majesty says, I had a companion, and a good companion, too. A young man? Yes, sire, a young man. Oh, your majesty must accept my compliments. You are as well informed of things out of doors as things within. It is M. Colbert who makes all these fine reports to the king. M. Colbert has said nothing but good of you, M. d'Artagnan, and he would have met with a bad reception if he had come to tell me anything else. That is fortunate. But he also said much good of that young man. And with justice, said the musketeer. In short, it appears that this young man is a fire-eater, said Louis, in order to sharpen the sentiment which he mistook for envy. A fire-eater. Yes, sire, repeated D'Artagnan, delighted on his part to direct the king's attention to Raoul. Do you not know his name? Well, I think... You know him, then? I have known him nearly 25 years, sire. Why, he is scarcely 25 years old, cried the king. Well, sire, I have known him ever since he was born. That is all. Do you affirm that? Sire, said D'Artagnan, your majesty questions me with mistrust in which I recognize another character than your own. M. Colbert, who has so well informed you, has he not forgotten to tell you that this young man is the son of my most intimate friend, the Vicomte de Bragelonne? Certainly, sire. The father of the Vicomte de Bragelonne is M. le Comte de la Fère, who so powerfully assisted in the restoration of King Charles II. Bragelonne comes of a valiant race, sire. Then he is the son of that nobleman who came to me, or rather to M. Mazarin, on the part of King Charles II, to offer me his alliance. Exactly, sire. And the Comte de la Fere is a great soldier, say you? Sire, he is a man who has drawn his sword more times for the king, your father, than there are, at present, months in the happy life of your majesty. It was Louis XIV, who now bit his lip. That is well, M. d'Artagnan, very well. And M. le Comte de la Fere is your friend, say you? For about 40 years. Yes, sire, your majesty may see that I do not speak to you of yesterday. Should you be glad to see this young man, M. d'Artagnan? Delighted, sire. The king touched his bell, and an usher appeared. Call M. de Bragelonne, said the king. Ah, he is he? Said D'Artagnan. He is on guard today, at the Louvre, with a company of the gentlemen of Monsieur le Prince. The king had scarcely ceased speaking, when Raoul presented himself, and, on seeing D'Artagnan, smiled on him with that charming smile which is only found upon the lips of youth. Come, said D'Artagnan, familiarly, to Raoul. The king will allow you to embrace me. Only tell his majesty you thank him. Raoul bowed so gracefully that Louis, to whom all superior qualities were pleasing when they did not overshadow his own, admired his beauty, strength, and modesty. Monsieur, said the king, addressing Raoul, I have asked Monsieur le Prince to be kind enough to give you up to me. I have received his reply, and you belong to me from this morning. Monsieur le Prince was a good master, but I hope you will not lose by the exchange. Yes, Raoul, be satisfied. The king has some good in him, said D'Artagnan, who had fathomed the character of Louis, and who played with his self-love within certain limits, always observing, be it understood, the proprieties and flattering, even when he appeared to be bantering. Sire, said Bragelonne, with a voice soft and musical, and with a natural and easy elocution he inherited from his father. Sire, it is not from today that I belong to your majesty. Oh, no, I know, said the king. You mean your enterprise of the Greve. That day you were truly mine, monsieur. Sire, it is not of that day I would speak. It would not become me to refer to so paltry a service in the presence of such a man as M. d'Artagnan. I would speak of a circumstance which created an epoch in my life, and which consecrated me, from the age of 16, to the devoted service of your majesty. Ah, said the king. What was its circumstance? Tell me, monsieur. This is it, Sire Dot. When I was setting out on my first campaign, that is to say, to join the army of Monsieur le Prince, M. le Comte de la Fere came to conduct me as far as Saint-Denis, where the remains of King Louis XIII wait upon the lowest steps of the funeral basilique, a successor whom God will not send him, I hope, for many years. Then he made me swear upon the ashes of our masters to serve royalty, represented by you, incarnate in you, sire, to serve it in word, in thought, and in action. I swore, and God and the dead were witnesses to my oath. During 10 years. Sire, I have not so often as I desired an occasion to keep it. I am a soldier of your majesty, and nothing else, and, on calling me nearer to you, I do not change my master, I only change my garrison. Raoul was silent, and bowed. Louis still listened after he had done speaking. Mordieu, cried D'Artagnan, that was well spoken. Was it not, your majesty? A good race, a noble race. Yes, murmured the agitated king, without, however, daring to manifest his emotion, for it had no other cause than contact with a nature intrinsically noble. Yes, monsieur, you say truly, wherever you were the king's. But in changing your garrison, believe me you will find an advancement of which you are worthy. Raoul saw that this ended what the king had to say to him, and with a perfect tact which characterized his refined nature, he bowed and retired. Is there anything else, monsieur, of which you have to inform me? Said the king, when he found himself again alone with D'Artagnan. Yes, sire, and I kept that news to the last, for it is said, and will clothe European royalty in mourning. What do you tell me? Sire, in passing through Blois, a word, a sad word, echoed from the palace, struck my ear. In truth, you terrify me, M. D'Artagnan. Sire, this word was pronounced to me by a piqueur who wore crape on his arm. My uncle, Gaston of Orleans, perhaps. Sire, he has rendered his last sigh. And I was not warned of it, cried the king, whose royal susceptibility saw an insult in the absence of this intelligence. Oh, do not be angry, sire, said D'Artagnan. Neither the couriers of Paris, nor the couriers of the whole world, can travel with your servant. The courier from Blois will not be here these 2 hours, and he rides well, I assure you, seeing that I only pass him on the side of Orleans. My uncle Gaston, murmured Louis, pressing his hand to his brow, and comprising in those 3 words all that his memory recalled of that symbol of opposing sentiments. Hey, yes, sire, it is thus, said D'Artagnan, philosophically replying to the royal thought. It is thus the past flies away. That is true, monsieur, that is true, but there remains for us, thank God, the future, and we will try to make it not too dark. I feel confidence in your majesty on that head, said D'Artagnan, bowing. And now? You are right, monsieur. I had forgotten the 100 leagues you have just ridden. Go, monsieur, take care of one of the best of soldiers, and when you have reposed a little, come and place yourself at my disposal. Sire, absent or present, I am always yours. D'Artagnan bowed and retired. Then, as if he had only come from Fontainebleau, he quickly traversed the Louvre to rejoin Bragelonne. Chapter 77. A Lover and His Mistress. Whilst the wax lights were burning in the castle of Blois, around the inanimate body of Gaston of Orleans, that last representative of the past, whilst the bourgeois of the city were thinking out his epitaph, which was far from being a panegyric, whilst Madame the Dowager, no longer remembering that in her young days she had loved that senseless corpse to such a degree as to fly to the paternal palace for his sake, was making, within 20 paces of the funeral apartment, her little calculations, of interest and her little sacrifices of pride. Other interests and other prides were in agitation in all the parts of the castle into which a living soul could penetrate. Neither the lugubrious sounds of the bells, nor the voices of the chanters, nor the splendor of the wax lights through the windows, nor the preparations for the funeral had power to divert the attention of 2 persons, placed at a window of the interior court, a window that we are acquainted with, and which lighted a chamber forming part of what were called the little apartments. For the rest, a joyous beam of the sun, for the sun appeared to care little for the loss France had just suffered. A sunbeam, we say, descended upon them, drawing perfumes from the neighboring flowers, and animating the walls themselves. These 2 persons, so occupied, not by the death of a duke, but by the conversation which was the consequence of that death, were a young woman and a young man. The latter personage, a man of from 25 to 26 years of age, with a mien sometimes lively and sometimes dull, making good use of 2 large eyes, shaded with long eyelashes, was short of stature and swart of skin. He smiled with an enormous but well-furnished mouth, and his pointed chin, which appeared to enjoy mobility nature does not ordinarily grant to that portion of the countenance, leant from time to time very lovingly towards his interlocutrix, who, we must say, did not always draw back so rapidly as strict propriety had a right to require. The young girl, we know her, for we have already seen her. At that very same window by the light of that same sun, the young girl presented a singular mixture of shyness and reflection. She was charming when she laughed, beautiful when she became serious. But, let us hasten to say, she was more frequently charming than beautiful. These 2 appeared to have attained the culminating point of a discussion, half bantering, half serious. Now, Monsieur Malicorne, said the young girl, does it, at length, please you that we should talk reasonably? You believe that is very easy, mademoiselle, replied the young man. To do what we like, when we can only do what we are able. Good. There he is bewildered in his phrases. Who? I. Yes, you quit that lawyer's logic, my dear. Another impossibility. Clerk I am, Mademoiselle de Montalais. Demoiselle I am, Monsieur Malicorne. Alas, I know it well, and you overwhelm me by your rank, so I will say no more to you. Well, no, I don't overwhelm you. Say what you have to tell me. Say, it, I insist upon it. Well, I obey you. That is truly fortunate. Monsieur is dead. Ah, pest, there's news. And where do you come from, to be able to tell us that? I come from Orleans, mademoiselle. And is that all the news you bring? Ah, no, I am come to tell you that Madame Henrietta of England is coming to marry the king's brother. Indeed, Melicorne, you are insupportable with your news of the last century. Now, mind, if you persist in this bad habit of laughing at people, I will have you turned out. Oh, yes, for really you exasperate me. There, patience, mademoiselle. You want to make yourself of consequence. I know well enough why. Go. Tell me, and I will answer you frankly, yes, if the thing be true. You know that I am anxious to have that commission of Lady of Honor, which I have been foolish enough to ask of you, and you do not use your credit. Who? I. Melicorne cast down his eyes, joined his hands, and assumed his sullen air. And what credit can the poor clerk of a procurer have, pray? Your father has not 20,000 livres a year for nothing, M. Melicorne. A provincial fortune, Mademoiselle de Mondelay. Your father is not in the secrets of Monsieur le Prince for nothing. An advantage which is confined to lending Monseigneur money. In a word, you are not the most cunning young fellow in the province for nothing. You flatter me. Who? I. Yes, you. How so? Since I maintain that I have no credit, and you maintain I have. Well, then, my commission. Well, your commission? Shall I have it, or shall I not? You shall have it. Eh, but when? When you like. Where is it, then? In my pocket. How? In your pocket. Yes. And, with a smile, Melicorne drew from his pocket a letter, upon which Mademoiselle seized as a prey, and which she read eagerly. As she read, her face brightened. Melicorne, cried she, after having read it, in truth, you are a good lad. What for, mademoiselle? Because you might have been paid for this commission, and you have not. And she burst into a loud laugh, thinking to put the clerk out of countenance. But Melicorne sustained the attack bravely. I do not understand you, said he. It was now Montalais who was disconcerted in her turn. I have declared my sentiments to you, continued Melicorne. You have told me 3 times, laughing all the while, that you did not love me. You have embraced me once without laughing, and that is all I want. All, said the proud and coquettish Montalais, in a tone through which wounded pride was visible. Absolutely all, mademoiselle, replied Melicorne. Ah! And this monosyllable indicated as much anger as the young man might have expected gratitude. He shook his head quietly. Listen, Montalais, said he, without heeding whether the familiarity pleased his mistress or not. Let us not dispute about it. And why not? Because during the year which I have known you, you might have had me turned out of doors 20 times if I did not please you. Indeed, and on what account should I have had you turned out? Because I had been sufficiently impertinent for that. Oh, yes, that's true. You see plainly that you are forced to avow it, said Melicorne. Monsieur Melicorne, don't let us be angry. If you have retained me, then it has not been without cause. It is not, at least, because I love you, cried Montalais. Granted. I will even say that, at this moment, I am certain that you hate me. Oh, you have never spoken so truly. Well, on my part one detest you. Ah, I take the act. Take it. You find me brutal and foolish. On my part one find you have a harsh voice, and your face is too often distorted with anger. At this moment you would allow yourself to be thrown out of that window rather than allow me to kiss the tip of your finger. I would precipitate myself from the top of the balcony rather than touch the hem of your robe. But in 5 minutes you will love me, and I shall adore you. Oh, it is just so. I doubt it, and I swear it. Coxcomb. And then, that is not the true reason. You stand in need of me, or and I of you. When it pleases you to be gay, I make you laugh. When it suits me to be loving, I look at you. I have given you a commission of lady of honor which you wish for. You will give me, presently, something I wish for. I will. Yes, you will. But at this moment, my dear, or I declare to you that I wish for absolutely nothing. So be at ease. You are a frightful man, Melicon. I was going to rejoice at getting this commission, and thus you quench my joy. Good. There is no time lost. You will rejoice when I am gone. Go, then, and after, so be it. But in the first place, a piece of advice. What is it? Resume your good humor. You are ugly when you pout. Course. Come, let us tell the truth to each other, while we are about it. Oh, Melicon, bad-hearted man. Oh, Montalais, ungrateful girl. The young man leant with his elbow upon the window frame. Montalais took a book and opened it. Melicon stood up, brushed his hat with his sleeve, smoothed down his black doublet. Montalais, though pretending to read, looked at him out of the corner of her eye. Good, cried she, furious. He has assumed his respectful air, and he will pout for a week. A fortnight, mademoiselle, said Melicon, bowing. Montalais lifted up her little doubled fist. Monster, said she, oh, that I were a man. What would you do to me? I would strangle you. Ah, very well. Then, said Melicon, I believe I begin to desire something. And what do you desire, Monsieur Demon? That I should lose my soul from anger. Melicon was rolling his hat respectfully between his fingers, but all at once he let fall his hat, seized the young girl by the shoulders, pulled her towards him, and sealed her mouth with two lips that were very warm, for a man pretending to so much indifference. Or would have cried out, but the cry was stifled in the kiss. Nervous and apparently angry, the young girl pushed Melicon against the wall. Good, said Melicon philosophically. That's enough for 6 weeks. Adieu, mademoiselle. Accept my very humble salutation. And he made 3 steps towards the door. Well, no, you shall not go, cried Montalais, stamping with a little foot. Stay where you are. I order you. You order me? Yes. Am I not mistress? Of my heart and soul, without doubt. A pretty property. Mau foi, the soul is silly and the heart dry. Beware, Montalais. I know you, said Melicon. You are going to fall in love with your humble servant. Well, yes, said she, hanging round his neck with childish indolence, rather than with loving abandonment. Well, yes, for I must thank you at least. And for what? For the commission. Is it not my whole future? And mine. Montalais looked at him. It is frightful, said she, that one can never guess whether you are speaking seriously or not. I cannot speak more seriously. I was going to Paris. You are going there. We are going there. And so it was for that motive only you have served me, selfish fellow. What would you have me say? Or, I cannot live without you. Well, in truth, it is just so with me. You are, nevertheless, it must be confessed, a very bad-hearted young man. Oh, my dear, take care. If you take to calling names again, you know the effect they produce upon me, and I shall adore you. And so saying, Melicon drew the young girl a second time towards him, but at that instant a step resounded on the staircase. The young people were so close that they would have been surprised in the arms of each other if Montalais had not violently pushed Melicon, with his back against the door, just then opening. A loud cry, followed by angry reproaches, immediately resounded. It was Madame de Saint-Remy who uttered the cry and the angry words. The unlucky Melicon almost crushed her between the wall and the door she was coming in at. It is again that good-for-nothing, cried the old lady. Always here. Aye, madam, replied Malicorne in a respectful tone. It is 8 long days since I was here. Chapter 78, in which we at length see the true heroine of this history appear. Behind Madame de Saint Remy stood Mademoiselle de la Valliere. She heard the explosion of maternal anger, and as she divined the cause of it, she entered the chamber trembling, and perceived the unlucky Malicorne, whose woeful countenance might have softened or set laughing whoever observed it coolly. He had promptly entrenched himself behind a large chaise, as if to avoid the first attacks of Madame de Saint Remy. He had no hopes of prevailing with words, for she spoke louder than he, and without stopping, but he reckoned upon the eloquence of his gestures. The old lady would neither listen to nor see anything. Malicorne had long been one of her antipathies, but her anger was too great not to overflow from Malicorne on his accomplice. Montalais had a turn. And you, mademoiselle, you may be certain I shall inform madame of what is going on in the apartment of one of her ladies of honor. Oh, dear mother, cried Mademoiselle de la Valliere, for mercy's sake, spare. Hold your tongue, mademoiselle, and do not uselessly trouble yourself to intercede for unworthy people. That a young maid of honor like you should be subjected to a bad example is, certes, a misfortune great enough, but that you should sanction it by your indulgence is what I will not allow. But in truth, said Montalais, rebelling again, I do not know under what pretense you treat me thus. I am doing no harm, I suppose. And that great good-for-nothing, mademoiselle, resumed Madame de Saint Remy, pointing to Malicorne, is he here to do any good, I ask you? He is neither here for good nor harm. Madame, he comes to see me, that is all. It is all very well, said the old lady. Her Royal Highness shall be informed of it, and she will judge. At all events, I do not see why, replied Montalais. It should be forbidden M. Malicorne to have intentions towards me if his intentions are honorable. Honorable intentions with such a face, cried Madame de Saint Remy. I thank you in the name of my face. Madame, said Malicorne. Come, my daughter, come, continued Madame de Saint Remy. We will go and inform Madame that the very moment she is weeping for her husband, at the moment when we are all weeping for a master in this old castle of Blois, the abode of grief, there are people who amuse themselves with flutations. Oh, cried both the accused with one voice. A maid of honor, cried the old lady, lifting her hands towards heaven. Well, it is that you are mistaken, madam, said Montalais, highly exasperated. I am no longer a maid of honor, of madame's at least. Have you given in your resignation, mademoiselle? That is well. I cannot but applaud such a determination, and I do applaud it. I do not give in my resignation. Madam, I take another service. That is all. In the bourgeoisie or in the robe, asked Madame de Saint Remy, disdainfully. Please to learn, madam, that I am not a girl to serve either bourgeoises or robins, and that instead of the miserable court at which you vegetate, I am going to reside in a court almost royal. Ha! Ha! A royal court, said Madame de Saint Remy, forcing a laugh. A royal court. What think you of that, my daughter? And she turned round towards Mademoiselle de la Valliere, whom she would by main force have dragged away from Montalais, and who, instead of obeying the impulse of Madame de Saint Remy, looked first at her mother and then at Montalais with her beautiful conciliatory eyes. I did not say a royal court, madam, replied Montalais, because Madame Henrietta of England, who is about to become the wife of S.A. Monsieur, is not a queen. I said almost royal, and I spoke correctly, since you will be sister-in-law to the king. A thunderbolt falling upon the castle of Blois would not have astonished Madame de Saint Remy more than the last sentence of Montalais. What do you say? Of Son Altesse Royal Madame Henrietta, stammered out the old lady. I say I am going to belong to her household, as maid of honor. That is what I say. As maid of honor, cried, at the same time, Madame de Saint Remy with despair, and Mademoiselle de la Valliere with delight. Yes, madam, as maid of honor. The old lady's head sank down as if the blow had been too severe for her. But, Almost immediately recovering herself, she launched a last projectile at her adversary. "Oh, oh," said she, "I have heard of many of these sorts of promises beforehand, which often lead people to flatter themselves with wild hopes, and at the last moment, when the time comes to keep the promises and have the hopes realized, they are surprised to see the great credit upon which they reckon vanish like smoke. Oh, madam, the credit of my protector is incontestable, and his promises as good as deeds. And would it be indiscreet to ask you the name of this powerful protector?" "Oh, mon Dieu, no, it is that gentleman there," said Montalais, pointing to Malicorne, who, during this scene, had preserved the most imperturbable coolness and the most comic dignity. "Monsieur," cried Madame de Saint Remy, with an explosion of hilarity, "Monsieur is your protector, is the man whose credit is so powerful, and whose promises as good as deeds, Monsieur Malicorne." Malicorne bowed. As to Montalais, as a sole reply, she drew the brevet from her pocket and showed it to the old lady. "Here is the brevet," said she. At once all was over. As soon as she had cast a rapid glance over this fortunate brevet, the good lady clasped her hands. An unspeakable expression of envy and despair contracted her countenance, and she was obliged to sit down to avoid fainting. Montalais was not malicious enough to rejoice extravagantly at a victory, or to overwhelm the conquered enemy, particularly when the enemy was the mother of a friend. She used then, but did not abuse, her triumph. Malicorne was less generous. He assumed noble poses in his fauteuil, and stretched himself out with a familiarity which, 2 hours earlier, would have drawn upon him threats of a caning. "Maid of honor to the young madam," repeated Madame de Saint Remy, still but half convinced. "Yes, madam, and through the protection of M. Malicorne, moreover." "It is incredible," repeated the old lady. "Is it not incredible, Louise?" But Louise did not reply. She was sitting, thoughtful, almost sad. Passing one hand over her beautiful brow, she sighed heavily. "Well, but, monsieur," said Madame de Saint Remy, all at once, "how did you manage to obtain this post?" "I asked for it, madam." "Of whom?" "One of my friends." "And have you friends sufficiently powerful at court to give you such proofs of their credit?" "It appears so." "And may one ask the name of these friends?" "I did not say I had many friends, madam. I said I had one friend." "And that friend is called?" "Peste, madam, you go too far. When one has a friend as powerful as mine, we do not publish his name in that fashion, in open day, in order that he may be stolen from us." "You are right, monsieur, to be silent as to that name, for I think it would be pretty difficult for you to tell it." "At all events," said Montalais, "if the friend does not exist, the brevet does, and that cuts short the question." "Then I conceive," said Madame de Saint Remy, with the gracious smile of the cat who is going to scratch, "when I found monsieur here just now." "Well, he brought you the brevet." "Exactly, madam, you have guessed rightly." "Well, then, nothing can be more moral or proper." "I think so, madam, and I have been wrong, as it appears, in reproaching you, mademoiselle." "Very wrong, madam, but I am so accustomed to your reproaches that I pardon you these." "In that case, let us begone, Louise. We have nothing to do but to retire." "Well, madam," said La Valliere, starting, "did you speak?" "You do not appear to be listening, my child." "No, madam, I was thinking." "About what?" "1,000 things." "You bear me no ill will, at least, Louise?" cried Montalais, pressing her hand. "And why should I, my dear old," replied the girl in a voice soft as a flute. "Dame," resumed Madame de Saint Remy, "if she did bear you a little ill will, poor girl, she could not be much blamed." "And why should she bear me ill will? Good gracious! It appears to me that she is of as good a family and as pretty as you." "Mother, mother," cried Louise. "Prettier 100 times, madam, not of a better family. But that does not tell me why Louise should bear me ill will." Do you think it will be very amusing for her to be buried alive at Blois when you are going to shine at Paris? But, madam, it is not I who prevent Louise following me thither. On the contrary, I should certainly be most happy if she came there. But it appears that M. Malicorne, who is all-powerful at court— "Ah, so much the worse, madam," said Malicorne. "Every one for himself in this poor world." "Malicorne, Malicorne," said Montalais, then stooping towards the young man. "Occupy Madame de Saint Remy, either in disputing with her or making it up with her. I must speak to Louise." And, at the same time, a soft pressure of the hand recompensed Malicorne for his future obedience. Malicorne went grumbling towards Madame de Saint Remy, whilst Montalais said to a friend, throwing one arm around her neck, "What is the matter? Tell me, is it true that you would not love me if I were to shine, as your mother says?" "Oh, no," said the young girl, with difficulty restraining her tears. "On the contrary, I rejoice at your good fortune." "Rejoice? Why, one would say you were ready to cry. Do people never weep except from envy?" "Oh, yes, I understand. I'm going to Paris, and that word Paris recalls to your mind a certain cavalier." "Oh." "A certain cavalier who formerly lived near Blois, and who now resides at Paris. In truth, I know not what ails me, but I feel stifled." "Weep, then, weep, as you cannot give me a smile." Louise raised a sweet face, which the tears, rolling down one after the other, illumined like diamonds. "Come, confess," said Montalais. "What shall I confess?" "What makes you weep? People don't weep without cause. I am your friend. Whatever you would wish me to do, I will do. Malicorne is more powerful than you would think. Do you wish to go to Paris?" "Alas," sighed Louise, "do you wish to come to Paris?" "To remain here alone, in this old castle, I who have enjoyed the delightful habit of listening to your songs, of pressing your hand, of running about the park with you. Oh, how I shall be ennuyé! How quickly I shall die! Do you wish to come to Paris?" Louise breathed another sigh. "You do not answer me. What would you that I should reply? Yes or no? That is not very difficult, I think." "Oh, you are very fortunate. Montalais. That is to say, you would like to be in my place." Louise was silent. "Little obstinate thing," said Montalais. "Did ever anyone keep his secrets from a friend thus? But confess that you would like to come to Paris. Confess that you are dying with a wish to see Raoul again." "I cannot confess that." "Then you are wrong." "In what way?" "Because, do you see this brevet?" "To be sure I do." "Well, I would have got you a similar one." "By whose means?" "Malicorne's." "Oh, are you telling the truth? Is that possible?" "Malicorne is there, and what he has done for me, he surely can do for you." Malicorne had heard his name pronounced twice. He was delighted at having an opportunity of coming to a conclusion with Madame de Saint Remy, and he turned round. "What is the question, mademoiselle?" "Come hither, Malicorne," said Montalais with an imperious gesture. Malicorne obeyed. "A brevet like this," said Montalais. "How so?" "A brevet like this, that is plain enough. But—" "I want one. I must have one." "Oh, oh, you must have one." "Yes." "It is impossible, is it not?" "M. Malicorne," said Louise, with a sweet, soft voice. "If it is for you, mademoiselle—" "For me. Yes, Monsieur Malicorne, it would be for me." "And if Mademoiselle de Montalais asks it at the same time?" "Mademoiselle de Montalais does not ask it, she requires it." "Well, we will endeavor to obey you, mademoiselle." "And you will have her named." "We will try." No evasive answers. "Louise de la Valliere shall be maid of honor to Madame Henrietta within a week." "How you talk." "Within a week, or else." "Well, or else." "You may take back your brevet. Monsieur Malicorne, I will not leave my friend." "Dear Montalais." That is right. Keep your brevet. Mademoiselle de la Valliere shall be a maid of honor. Is that true? Quite true. I may then hope to go to Paris. Depend upon it. Oh, Monsieur Melicorne, what joy! Cried Louise, clapping her hands and bounding with pleasure. Little dissembler, said Montalais, try again to make me believe you are not in love with Raoul. Louise blushed like a rose in June, but instead of replying, she ran and embraced her mother. Madam, said she, do you know that M. Melicorne is going to have me appointed maid of honor? M. Melicorne is a prince in disguise, replied the old lady. He is all-powerful, seemingly. Should you also like to be maid of honor, ask Melicorne of Madame de Saint Remy. Whilst I am about it, I might as well get everybody appointed. And upon that he went away, leaving the poor lady quite disconcerted. Humph, murmured Melicorne as he descended the stairs. Humph, there goes another note of 1,000 livres. But I must get through as well as I can. My friend Manicamp does nothing for nothing. Chapter 79. Melicorne and Manicamp. The introduction of these two new personages into this history and that mysterious affinity of names and sentiments merits some attention on the part of both historian and reader. We will then enter into some details concerning Messrs. Melicorne and Manicamp. Melicorne, we know, had made the journey to Orleans in search of the brevet destined for Mademoiselle de Montalais, the arrival of which had produced such a strong feeling at the castle of Blois. At that moment, M. de Manicamp was at Orleans. A singular person was this M. de Manicamp, a very intelligent young fellow, always poor, always needy, although he dipped his hand freely into the purse of le Comte de Guiche, one of the best furnished purses of the period. M. le Comte de Guiche had, as a companion of his boyhood, this de Manicamp, a poor gentleman, vassal-born of the house of Grandmorne. M. de Manicamp, with his tact and talent, had created himself a revenue in the opulent family of the celebrated Miracle. From his infancy he had, with calculation beyond his age, lent his name and complaisance to the follies of the Comte de Guiche. If his noble companion had stolen some fruit destined for Madame la Marquise, if he had broken a mirror, or put out a dog's eye, Manicamp declared himself guilty of the crime committed, and received the punishment, which was not made the milder for falling on the innocent. But this was the way the system of abnegation was paid for. Instead of wearing such mean habiliments as his paternal fortunes entitled him to, he was able to appear brilliant, superb, like a young noble of 50,000 livres a year. It was not that he was mean in character or humble in spirit. No, he was a philosopher, or rather he had the indifference, the apathy, the obstinacy which banished from men every sentiment of the supernatural. His sole ambition was to spend money. But, in this respect, the worthy M. de Manicamp was a Guelph. 3 or 4 times every year he drained the Comte de Guiche, and when the Comte de Guiche was thoroughly drained, when he had turned out his pockets and his purse before him, when he declared that it would be at least a fortnight before paternal munificence would refill those pockets and that purse, Manicamp lost all his energy. He went to bed, remained there, ate nothing and sold his handsome clothes, under the pretense that, remaining in bed, he did not want them. During this prostration of mind and strength, the purse of the Comte de Guiche was getting full again, and when once filled, overflowed into that of de Manicamp, who bought new clothes, dressed himself again, and recommenced the same life he had followed before. The mania of selling his new clothes for a quarter of what they were worth had rendered our hero sufficiently celebrated in Orleans, a city where, in general, we should be puzzled to say why he came to pass his days of penitence. Provincial debauches, petty maidens of 600 livres a year, shared the fragments of his opulence. Among the admirers of these splendid toilettes, our friend Melicorne was conspicuous. He was the son of a syndic of the city, of whom M. de Condé, always needy as a de Condé, often borrowed money at enormous interest. M. Melicorne kept the paternal money chest. That is to say, that in those times of easy morals, he had made for himself, by following the example of his father and lending at high interest at short terms, a revenue of 1,800 livres, without reckoning 600 livres furnished by the generosity of the syndic, so that Melicorne was the king of the gay youth of Orleans, having 2,400 livres to scatter, squander, and waste on follies of every kind. But, quite contrary to Menacamp, Malicorne was terribly ambitious. He loved from ambition. He spent money out of ambition, and he would have ruined himself for ambition. Malicorne had determined to rise, at whatever price it might cost, and for this, at whatever price it did cost, he had given himself a mistress and a friend. The mistress, Mademoiselle de Montalais, was cruel as regarded love, but she was of a noble family, and that was sufficient for Malicorne. The friend had little or no friendship, but he was a favorite of the Comte de Guiche, himself the friend of Monsieur, the king's brother, and that was sufficient for Malicorne. Only, in the chapter of charges, Mademoiselle de Montalais cost per annum, ribbons, gloves, and sweets, 1,000 livres. De Menacamp cost, money lent, never returned, from 12 to 1,500 livres per annum, so that there was nothing left for Malicorne. Ah, yes, we are mistaken. There was left the paternal strong box. He employed a mode of proceeding, upon which he preserved the most profound secrecy, and which consisted in advancing to himself from the coffers of the syndic 6 years' profits, that is to say, 15,000 livres, swearing to himself, observe, quite to himself, to repay this deficiency as soon as an opportunity should present itself. The opportunity was expected to be the concession of a good post in the household of Monsieur, when the household would be established at the period of his marriage. This juncture had arrived, and the household was about to be established. A good post in the family of a prince of the blood, when it is given by the credit and on the recommendation of a friend, like the Comte de Guiche, is worth at least 12,000 livres per annum, and by the means which M. Malicorne had taken to make his revenues fructify, 12,000 livres might rise to 20,000. Then, when once an incumbent of this post, he would marry Mademoiselle de Montalais. Mademoiselle de Montalais, of a half-noble family, not only would be dowered, but would ennoble Malicorne. But, in order that Mademoiselle de Montalais, who had not a large patrimonial fortune, although an only daughter, should be suitably dowered, it was necessary that she should belong to some great princess, as prodigal as the dowager madam was covetous. And in order that the wife should not be of one party whilst the husband belonged to the other, a situation which presents serious inconveniences, particularly with characters like those of the future consorts, Malicorne had imagined the idea of making the central point of union the household of Monsieur, the king's brother. Mademoiselle de Montalais will be maid of honor to Madame. M. Malicorne would be officer to Monsieur. It is plain the plan was formed by a clear head. It is plain, also, that it had been bravely executed. Malicorne had asked Menacamp to ask a brevet of maid of honor of the Comte de Guiche, and the Comte de Guiche had asked this brevet of Monsieur, who had signed it without hesitation. The constructive plan of Malicorne, for we may well suppose that the combinations of a mind as active as his were not confined to the present, but extended to the future, the constructive plan of Malicorne, we say, was this: to obtain entrance into the household of Madame Henrietta for a woman devoted to himself, who was intelligent, young, handsome, and intriguing; to learn, by means of this woman, all the feminine secrets of the young household, whilst he, Malicorne, and his friend Menacamp, should, between them, know all the male secrets of the young community. It was by these means that a rapid and splendid fortune might be acquired at one and the same time. Malicorne was a vile name. He who bore it had too much wit to conceal this truth from himself, but an estate might be purchased, and Malicorne of some place, or even de Malicorne itself, for short, would ring more nobly on the ear. It was not improbable that a most aristocratic origin might be hunted up by the heralds for this name of Malicorne. Might it not come from some estate where a bull with mortal horns had caused some great misfortune, and baptized the soil with the blood it had spilt? Certes, this plan presented itself bristling with difficulties, but the greatest of all was Mademoiselle de Montalais herself, capricious, variable, close, giddy, free, prudish, a virgin armed with claws, Aragon stained with grapes. She sometimes overturned, with a single dash of her white fingers, or with a single puff from her laughing lips, the edifice which had exhausted Malicorne's patience for a month. Love apart, Malicorne was happy, but this love, which he could not help feeling, He had the strength to conceal with Kay, persuaded that at the less relaxing of the ties by which he had bound his protean female, the demon would overthrow him and laugh at him. He humbled his mistress by disdaining her. Burning with desire, when she advanced to tempt him, he had the art to appease ice, persuaded that if he opened his arms, she would run away laughing at him. On her side, Mondelez believed she did not love Malicorne, whilst, on the contrary, in reality she did. Malicorne repeated to her so often his protestation of indifference that she finished sometimes by believing him, and then she believed she detested Malicorne. If she tried to bring him back by coquetry, Malicorne played the coquette better than she could. But what made Mondelez hold to Malicorne in an indissoluble fashion was that Malicorne always came crammed full of fresh news from the court and the city. Malicorne always brought to boudoir fashion a secret or a perfume, that Malicorne never asked for a meeting, but, on the contrary, required to be supplicated to receive the favors he burned to obtain. On her side, Mondelez was no miser with stories. By her means, Malicorne learnt all that passed at Boual, in the family of the Dowager Madame, and he related to Manicamp tales that made him ready to die with laughing, which the latter, out of idleness, took ready-made to M. de Guiche, who carried them to Monsieur. Such, in 2 words, was the woof of petty interests and petty conspiracies which united Blois with Orleans and Orleans with Paris, and which was about to bring into the last-named city, where she was to produce so great a revolution, the poor little La Valliere, who was far from suspecting, as she returned joyfully, leaning on the arm of a mother, for what a strange future she was reserved. As to the good man, Malicorne, we speak of the Syndic of Orleans. He did not see more clearly into the present than others did into the future, and had no suspicion as he walked, every day, between 3 and 5 o'clock, after his dinner, upon the Place St. Catherine, in his grey coat, cut after the fashion of Louis XIII, and his cloth shoes with great knots of ribbon, that it was he who was paying for all those bursts of laughter, all those stolen kisses, all those whisperings, all those little keepsakes, and all those bubble projects which form a chain of 45 leagues in length, from the Palais of Blois to the Palais Royal. Chapter 80. Manicamp and Malicorne. Malicorne, then, left Blois, as we have said, and went to find his friend Manicamp, then in temporary retreat in the city of Orleans. It was just at the moment when that young nobleman was employed in selling the last decent clothing he had left. He had, a fortnight before, extorted from the Comte de Guiche 100 pistoles, all he had, to assist in equipping him properly to go and meet Madame, on her arrival at Havre. He had drawn from Malicorne, 3 days before, 50 pistoles, the price of the brevet obtained from Mondelez. He had then no expectation of anything else, having exhausted all his resources, with the exception of selling a handsome suit of cloth and satin, embroidered and laced with gold, which had been the admiration of the court. But to be able to sell this suit, the last he had left, as we have been forced to confess to the reader, Manicamp had been obliged to take to his bed. No more fire, no more pocket money, no more walking money, nothing but sleep to take the place of repasts, companies, and balls. It has been said, he who sleeps, dines, but it has never been affirmed, he who sleeps, plays, or he who sleeps, dances. Manicamp, reduced to this extremity of neither playing nor dancing, for a week at least, was, consequently, very sad. He was expecting a usurer, and saw Malicorne enter. A cry of distress escaped him. "Hey, what?" said he, in a tone which nothing can describe. "Is that you again, dear friend?" You are very polite," said Malicorne. "Eh, but look you, I was expecting money, and, instead of money, I see you. And suppose I brought you some money." "Oh, that will be quite another thing. You are very welcome, my dear friend." And he held out his hand, not for the hand of Malicorne, but for the purse. Malicorne pretended to be mistaken, and gave him his hand. "And the money?" said Manicamp. "My dear friend, if you wish to have it, earn it." "What must be done for it?" "Earn it, parbleu." "And after what fashion?" "Oh, that is rather trying, I warn you." "The devil! You must get out of bed, and go immediately to M. Comte de Guiche." "I get out. said Menacamp, stretching himself in his bed complacently. "Oh, no, thank you. You have sold all your clothes." "No, I have one suit left, the handsomest even, but I expect a purchaser." "And the shows?" "Well, if you look, you will see them on that J." "Very well. Since you have some shows and a pull point left, put your legs into the first and your back into the other. Have a horse saddled, and set off." "Not I." "And why not?" "Maud you. Don't you know, then, that M. de Guiche is at Etamps?" "No, I thought he was at Paris." "You will then only have 15 leagues to go, instead of 30. You are a wonderfully clever fellow. If I were to ride 15 leagues in these clothes, they would never be fit to put on again, and, instead of selling them for 30 pistoles, I should be obliged to take 15. Sell them for what you like, but I must have a second commission of maid of honor." "Good. For whom? Is Montalais doubled then?" "Vile fellow, it is you who had doubled. You swallow up 2 fortunes, mine and that of M. le Comte de Guiche." "You should say, that of M. le Comte de Guiche and yours." "That is true. Honor where it is due, but I return to my brevet." "And you are wrong." "Prove me that." "My friend, there will only be 12 maids of honor for Madame. I have already obtained for you what 1,200 women are trying for, and for that I was forced to employ all my diplomacy." "Oh, yes, I know you are being quite heroic, my dear friend." "We know what we are about," said Menacamp. "To whom do you tell that?" "When I am king, I promise you one thing." "What?" "To call yourself Malicorne the First." "No, to make you superintendent of my finances. But that is not the question now. Unfortunately, the present affair is to procure for me a second place of maid of honor. My friend, if you were to promise me the price of heaven, I would decline to disturb myself at this moment." Malicorne chinked the money in his pocket. "There are 20 pistoles here," said Malicorne. "And what would you do with 20 pistoles? Mon Dieu." "Well," said Malicorne, a little angrily, "suppose I were to add them to the 500 you already owe me." "You are right," replied Menacamp, stretching out his hand again, "and from that point of view I can accept them. Give them to me." "An instant! What the devil! It is not only holding out your hand that will do. If I give you the 20 pistoles, shall I have my brevet?" "To be sure you shall." "Soon?" "Today." "Oh, take care, Monsieur de Menacamp. You undertake much, and I do not ask that. 30 leagues in a day is too much. You would kill yourself." "I think nothing impossible, an obliging friend." "You are quite heroic. Where are the 20 pistoles?" "Here they are," said Malicorne, showing them. "That's well." "Yes, but my dear Menacamp, you would consume them in post horses alone." "No, no, make yourself easy on that score." "Pardon me. Why, it is 15 leagues from this place to Etamps." 14. "Well, 14 be it. 14 leagues make 7 posts. At 20 sous a post, 7 livres. 7 livres a courier, 14. As many for coming back, 28. As much for bed and supper. That makes 60 livres as complaisance would cost." Menacamp stretched himself like a serpent in his bed, and fixing his 2 great eyes upon Malicorne. "You are right," said he. "I could not return before tomorrow," and he took the 20 pistoles. "Now, then, be off." "Well, as I cannot be back before tomorrow, we have time." "Time for what?" "Time to play." "What do you wish to play with?" "Your 20 pistoles. Pad you." "No, you always win." "I will wager them. Then." "Against what?" "Against 20 others." "And what shall be the object of the wager?" "This. We have said it was 14 leagues to Etamps." "Yes." "And 14 leagues back?" "Doubtless." "Well, for these 28 leagues you cannot allow less than 14 hours." "That is agreed." 1 hour to find the Comte de Guiche. Go on. And an hour to persuade him to write a letter to Monsieur. Just so. 16 hours in all. You reckon as well as M. Colbert. It is now 12 o'clock. Half past. Hein, you have a handsome watch. What were you saying? Said Malicorne, putting his watch quickly back into his fob. Ah, true. I was offering to lay you 20 pistoles against these you have lent me, that you will have the Comte de Guiche's letter in. How soon? In 8 hours. Have you a winged horse? Then, that is no matter. Will you bet? I shall have the Comte's letter in 8 hours. Yes. In hand. In hand. Well, be it so. I lay, said Malicorne, curious to know how the sale of clothes would get through. Is it agreed? It is. Pass me the pen, ink, and paper. Here they are. Thank you. Manicamp raised himself with a sigh, and leaning on his left elbow, in his best hand, traced the following lines. Good for an order for a place of maid of honor to Madame, which M. le Comte de Guiche will take upon him to obtain at sight. De Manicamp. This painful task accomplished, he laid himself down in bed again. Well, asked Malicorne, what does this mean? That means that if you are in a hurry to have a letter from the Comte de Guiche for Monsieur, I have won my wager. How the devil is that? That is transparent enough. I think you take that paper. Well, and you set out instead of me. Ah, you put your horses to their best speed. Good. In 6 hours you will be at Etamps. In 7 hours you have a letter from the Comte, and I shall have won my wager without stirring from my bed, which suits me and you two. At the same time, I am very sure. Decidedly, Manicamp, you are a great man. Hein, I know that. I am to start then for Etamps. Directly. I am to go to the Comte de Guiche with this order. He will give you a similar one for Monsieur. Monsieur will approve. Instantly. And I shall have my brevet. You will. Ah. Well, I hope I behave genteelly. Adorably. Thank you. You do as you please. Then, with the Comte de Guiche, Malicorne, except making money of him, everything. Diable. The exception is annoying, but then, if instead of asking him for money, you were to ask. What? Something important. What do you call important? Well, suppose one of your friends asked you to render him a service. I would not render it to him. Selfish fellow. Or at least I would ask him what service he would render me in exchange. Ah, that, perhaps, is fair? Well, that friend speaks to you. What? You, Malicorne? Yes, I. Ah, you are rich. Then, I have still 50 pistoles left. Exactly the sum I want. Where are those 50 pistoles? Hey, said Malicorne, slapping his pocket. Then speak, my friend. What do you want? Malicorne took up the pen, ink, and paper again, and presented them all to Manicamp. Right, said he. Dictate. An order for a place in the household of Monsieur. Oh, said Manicamp, laying down the pen. A place in the household of Monsieur for 50 pistoles. You mistook me, my friend. You did not hear plainly. What did you say? Then, I said 500. And the 500. Here they are. Manicamp devoured the rouleau with his eyes, but this time Malicorne held it at a distance. Hey, what do you say to that? 500 pistoles. I say it is for nothing, my friend, said Manicamp, taking up the pen again, and you exhaust my credit. Dictate. Malicorne continued, which my friend the Comte de Guiche will obtain for my friend Malicorne. That's it, said Manicamp. Pardon me, you have forgotten to sign. Ah, that is true. The 500 pistoles. Here are 250 of them. And the other 250. when I am in possession of my place. Manicamp made a face. In that case, give me the recommendation back again. What to do? To add 2 words to it. 2 words. Yes, 2 words only. What are they? In haste. Melicorne returned the recommendation. Manicamp added the words. Good, said Melicorne, taking back the paper. Manicamp began to count out the pistoles. There want 20, said he. How so? The 20 I have won. In what way? By laying that you would have a letter from the Comte de Guiche in 8 hours. Ah, that's fair, and he gave him the 20 pistoles. Manicamp began to scoop up his gold by handfuls, and pour it in cascades upon his bed. The second place, murmured Melicorne, whilst drying his paper, which at the first glance appears to cost me more than the first, but he stopped, took up the pen in his turn, and wrote to Montalais. Mademoiselle, announce to your friend that her commission will not be long before it arrives. I am setting out to get it signed. There will be 28 leagues I shall have gone for the love of you. Then with his sardonic smile, taking up the interrupted sentence, this place, said he, at the first glance, appears to cost more than the first. But the benefit will be, I hope, in proportion with the expense, and Mademoiselle de la Valliere will bring me back more than Mademoiselle de Montalais, or else my name is not Melicorne. Farewell, Manicamp. And he left the room. Chapter 81. The courtyard of the Hotel Grand Morne. On Melicorne's arrival at Orleans, he was informed that the Comte de Guiche had just set out for Paris. Melicorne rested himself for a couple of hours, and then prepared to continue his journey. He reached Paris during the night, and alighted at a small hotel, where, in his previous journeys to the capital, he had been accustomed to put up, and at 8 o'clock the next morning presented himself at the Hotel Grand Morne. Melicorne arrived just in time, for the Comte de Guiche was on the point of taking leave of Monsieur before setting out for Havre, where the principal members of the French nobility had gone to await Madame's arrival from England. Melicorne pronounced the name of Manicamp, and was immediately admitted. He found the Comte de Guiche in the courtyard of the Hotel Grand Morne, inspecting his horses, which his trainers and equerries were passing in review before him. The Count, in the presence of his tradespeople and of his servants, was engaged in praising or blaming, as the case seemed to deserve, the appointments, horses, and harness that were being submitted to him, when, in the midst of this important occupation, the name of Manicamp was announced. Manicamp, he exclaimed, let him enter by all means. And he advanced a few steps toward the door. Melicorne slipped through the half-open door, and looking at the Comte de Guiche, who was surprised to see a face he did not recognize, instead of the one he expected, said, Forgive me, Monsieur le Comte, but I believe a mistake has been made. M. Manicamp himself was announced to you, instead of which it is only an envoy from him. Ah, exclaimed de Guiche, coldly, and what do you bring me? A letter, Monsieur le Comte. Melicorne handed him the first document, and narrowly watched the Count's face, who, as he read it, began to laugh. What? He exclaimed. Another maid of honor. Are all the maids of honor in France? Then, under his protection, Melicorne bowed. Why does he not come himself? He inquired. He is confined to his bed. The deuce? He has no money then, I suppose, said de Guiche, shrugging his shoulders. What does he do with his money? Melicorne made a movement, to indicate that upon this subject he was as ignorant as the Count himself. Why does he not make use of his credit? Then, continued de Guiche, with regard to that, I think... What? That Manicamp has credit with no one but yourself, Monsieur le Comte. He will not be at Havre, then... Whereupon Melicorne made another movement. But every one will be there. I trust, Monsieur le Comte, that he will not neglect so excellent an opportunity. He should be at Paris by this time. He will take the direct road perhaps to make up for lost time. Where is he now? At Orleans. Monsieur, said de Guiche, you seem to me a man of very good taste. Melicorne was wearing some of Manicamp's old new clothes. He bowed in return, saying, "You do me a very great honor, Monsieur le Comte. Whom have I the pleasure of addressing?" "My name is Melicorne, Monsieur. M. de Melicorne. What do you think of these pistol holsters?" Melicorne was a man of great readiness, and immediately understood the position of affairs. Besides, the de which had been prefixed to his name raised him to the rank of the person with whom he was conversing. He looked at the holsters with the air of a connoisseur and said, without hesitation, "Somewhat heavy, monsieur." "You see," said de Guiche to the saddler, "this gentleman, who understands these matters well, thinks the holsters heavy, a complaint I had already made." The saddler was full of excuses. "What do you think," asked de Guiche, "of this horse which I have just purchased?" "To look at it, it seems perfect, Monsieur le Comte, but I must mount it before I give you my opinion." "Do so, M. de Melicorne, and ride him round the court 2 or 3 times." The courtyard of the hotel was so arranged that whenever there was any occasion for it, it could be used as a riding school. Melicorne, with perfect ease, arranged the bridle and snaffle reins, placed his left hand on the horse's menere, and, with his foot in the stirrup, raised himself and seated himself in the saddle. At first, he made the horse walk the whole circuit of the courtyard at a foot pace, next at a trot, lastly at a gallop. He then drew up close to the Count, dismounted, and threw the bridle to a groom standing by. "Well," said the Count, "what do you think of it, M. de Melicorne?" "This horse, Monsieur le Comte, is of the Mecklenburg breed. In looking whether the bit suited his mouth, I saw that he was rising 7, the very age when the training of a horse intended for a charger should commence. The forehand is light. A horse which holds its head high, it is said, never tires his rider's hand. The withers are rather low. The drooping of the hind quarters would almost make me doubt the purity of its German breed, and I think there is English blood in him. He stands well on his legs, but he trots high and may cut himself, which requires attention to be paid to his shoeing. He is tractable, and as I made him turn round and change his feet, I found him quick and ready in doing so." "Well said, M. de Melicorne," exclaimed the Comte. "You are a judge of horses, I perceive." Then, turning towards him again, he continued, "You are most becomingly dressed, M. de Melicorne. That is not a provincial cut, I presume. Such a style of dress is not to be met with at Tours or Orleans." "No, Monsieur le Comte, my clothes were made at Paris." "There is no doubt about that. But let us resume our own affair. Manicamp wishes for the appointment of a second maid of honor. You perceive what he has written, Monsieur le Comte. For whom was the first appointment?" Melicorne felt the color rise in his face as he answered hurriedly, "A charming maid of honor, Mademoiselle de Montalais." Ah, you are acquainted with her." "We are affianced, or nearly so." "That is quite another thing, then. 1,000 compliments," exclaimed de Guiche, upon whose lips a courtier's jest was already fitting, but whom the word affianced, addressed by Melicorne with respect to Mademoiselle de Montalais, recalled the respect due to women. "And for whom is the second appointment destined?" asked de Guiche. "Is it for anyone to whom Manicamp may happen to be affianced? In that case I pity her, poor girl, for she will have a sad fellow for a husband." "No, Monsieur le Comte, the second appointment is for Mademoiselle de la Baume le Blanc de la Valliere." "Unknown," said de Guiche. "Unknown? Yes, monsieur," said Melicorne, smiling in his turn. "Very good. I will speak to monsieur about it. By the by, she is of gentle birth. She belongs to a very good family, and is maid of honor to Madame." "That's well. Will you accompany me to monsieur?" "Most certainly, if I may be permitted the honor." "Have you your carriage?" "No, I came here on horseback." "Dressed as you are?" "No, monsieur. I posted from Orleans, and I changed my traveling suit for the one I have on, in order to present myself to you." "True. You already told me you had come from Orleans," saying which he crumpled Manicamp's letter in his hand and thrust it in his pocket. "I beg your pardon," said Melicorne, timidly, "but I do not think you have read all." Not read all, do you say? No, there were 2 letters in the same envelope. Oh, are you sure? Quite sure. Let us look, then, said the Count, as he opened the letter again. Ah, you are right, he said, opening the paper which he had not yet read. I suspected it, he continued. Another application for an appointment under Monsieur. This Manicamp is a regular vampire. He is carrying on a trade in it. No, Monsieur le Comte. He wishes to make a present of it. To whom? To myself, Monsieur. Why did you not say so at once, my dear mauvaise con? Malicorne, Monsieur le Comte. Forgive me. It is the Latin that bothers me, that terrible mind of etymologies. Why the deuce a young man of family taught Latin? Mal and mauvaise. You understand it is the same thing. You will forgive me. I trust M. de Malicorne. Your kindness affects me much, Monsieur, but it is a reason why I should make you acquainted with one circumstance without any delay. What is it? That I was not born a gentleman. I am not without courage, and not altogether deficient in ability, but my name is Malicorne simply. You appear to me, Monsieur, exclaimed the Count, looking at the astute face of his companion, to be a most agreeable man. Your face pleases me, M. Malicorne, and you must possess some indisputably excellent qualities to have pleased that egotistical Manicamp. Be candid, and tell me whether you are not some saint descended upon the earth. Why so? For the simple reason that he makes you a present of anything. Did you not say that he intended to make you a present of some appointment in the king's house? I beg your pardon, Count, but if I succeed in obtaining the appointment, you, and not he, will have bestowed it on me. Besides, he will not have given it to you for nothing, I suppose. Stay, I have it. There's a Malicorne at Orleans who lends money to the prince. I think that must be my father, Monsieur. Ah, the prince has the father, and that terrible dragon of a Manicamp has the son. Take care, Monsieur. I know him. He will fleece you completely. The only difference is that I lend without interest, said Malicorne, smiling. I was correct in saying you were either a saint or very much resembled one. M. Malicorne, you shall have the post you want, or I will forfeit my name. Ah, Monsieur le Comte, what a debt of gratitude shall I not owe you, said Malicorne, transported. Let us go to the prince, my dear M. Malicorne. And de Guiche proceeded toward the door, desiring Malicorne to follow him. At the very moment they were about to cross the threshold, a young man appeared on the other side. He was from 24 to 25 years of age, of pale complexion, bright eyes, and brown hair and eyebrows. Good day, he said, suddenly, almost pushing de Guiche back into the courtyard again. Is that you, De Wardes? What? And booted, spurred, and whip in hand, too. The most befitting costume for a man about to set off for Havre. There will be no one left in Paris tomorrow. And hereupon he saluted Malicorne with great ceremony, whose handsome dress gave him the appearance of a prince. M. Malicorne, said de Guiche to his friend. De Wardes bowed. M. de Wardes, said Guiche to Malicorne, who bowed in return. By the by, De Wardes, continued de Guiche, you are so well acquainted with these matters. Can you tell us, probably, what appointments are still vacant at the court, or rather in the prince's household? In the prince's household, said De Wardes, looking up with an air of consideration. Let me see. The appointment of the master of the horse is vacant, I believe. Oh, said Malicorne, there is no question of such a post as that, Monsieur. My ambition is not nearly so exalted. De Wardes had a more penetrating observation than de Guiche, and fathomed Malicorne immediately. The fact is, he said, looking at him from head to foot, a man must be either a duke or a peer to fill that post. All I solicit, said Malicorne, is a very humble appointment. I am of little importance, and I do not rank myself above my position. M. Malicorne, whom you see here, said de Guiche to De Wardes, is a very excellent fellow, whose only misfortune is that of not being of gentle birth. As far as I'm concerned, you know, I attach little value to those who have but gentle birth to boast of. Assuredly, said the wards. But will you allow me to remark, my dear Count, that, without rank of some sort, one can hardly hope to belong to His Royal Highness's household? You are right, said the Count. Court etiquette is absolute. The devil, we never so much as gave it a thought. Alas, a sad misfortune for me, Monsieur le Comte, said Malicorne, changing colour. Yet not without remedy, I hope, returned de Guiche. The remedy is found easily enough, exclaimed the wards. You can be created a gentleman. His Eminence, the Cardinal Mazarin, did nothing else from morning till night. Hush, hush, de wards, said the Count. No jest of that kind. It becomes us to turn such matters into ridicule. Letters of nobility, it is true, are purchasable, but that is a sufficient misfortune without the nobles themselves laughing at it. Upon my word, de Guiche, you're quite a Puritan, as the English say. At this moment the Vicomte de Bragelonne was announced by one of the servants in the courtyard, in precisely the same manner as he would have done in a room. Come here, my dear Raoul. What? You, too, booted and spurred? You are setting off. Then... Bragelonne approached a group of young men, and saluted them with that quiet and serious manner peculiar to him. His salutation was principally addressed to the wards, with whom he was unacquainted, and whose features, on his perceiving Raoul, had assumed a strange sternness of expression. I have come, de Guiche, he said, to ask your companionship. We set off for Havre, I presume. This is admirable, delightful. We shall have a most enjoyable journey. M. Malicorne, M. Bragelonne. Ah, M. de Wards, let me present you. The young men saluted each other in a restrained manner. Their very natures seemed, from the beginning, disposed to take exception to each other. De Wards was pliant, subtle, full of dissimulation. Raoul was calm, grave, and upright. Decide between us, between de Wards and myself, Raoul. Upon what subject? Upon the subject of noble birth. Who can be better informed on that subject than a de Gramont? No compliments. It is your opinion I ask. At least, inform me of the subject under discussion. De Wards asserts that the distribution of titles is abused. I, on the contrary, maintain that a title is useless to the man on whom it is bestowed. And you are correct, said Bragelonne, quietly. But, Monsieur le Vicomte, interrupted de Wards, with a kind of obstinacy, I affirm that it is I who am correct. What was your opinion, monsieur? I was saying that everything is done in France at the present moment to humiliate men of family. And by whom? By the king himself. He surrounds himself with people who cannot show forequarterings. Nonsense, said de Guiche. Where could you possibly have seen that, de Wards? One example will suffice, he returned, directing his look fully upon Raoul. State it then. Do you know who has just been nominated Captain General of the Musketeers? An appointment more valuable than a peerage, for it gives precedence over all the Marechals of France. Raoul's colour mounted in his face, for he saw the object de Wards had in view. No, who has been appointed? In any case, it must have been very recently, for the appointment was vacant 8 days ago, a proof of which is that the king refused Monsieur, who solicited the post for one of his protégés. Well, the king refused it to Monsieur's protégé in order to bestow it upon the Chevalier d'Artagnan, a younger brother of some Gascon family, who has been trailing his sword in the antechambers during the last 30 years. Forgive me if I interrupt you, said Raoul, darting a glance full of severity at de Wards, but you give me the impression of being unacquainted with the gentleman of whom you are speaking. I'm not acquainted with M. d'Artagnan? Can you tell me, monsieur, who does not know him? Those who do know him, monsieur, replied Raoul with still greater calmness and sternness of manner, are in the habit of saying that if he is not as good a gentleman as the king, which is not his fault, he is the equal of all the kings of the earth in courage and loyalty. Such is my opinion, monsieur, and I thank heaven I have known M. d'Artagnan from my birth. De Wardes was about to reply when de Guiche interrupted him.